Chapter 47-34. Ji Tianqing was well aware of the current situation. Before Heaven and Earth Lord understood the situation or knew how many people were on the battleship, he had already thought of a follow-up plan. Since he had a clear goal and plan, he could not waste any time. Ji Tianqing decisively ordered White Dragon to be in charge of fleeing and dodging while he controlled the battleship's divine cannons and defenses. White Dragon naturally obeyed and focused on controlling the battleship, constantly paying attention to the surrounding situation. Ji Tianqing locked onto Heaven and Earth Lord's aura and quickly activated the divine cannons. Immediately, more than 360 divine cannons lit up with divine light, accumulating terrifying power. An invisible pressure locked onto Heaven and Earth Lord 40,000 miles behind the battleship, greatly increasing the pressure on him and causing him to feel cold all over. When Heaven and Earth Lord saw the rows of cannons, he immediately understood what was going on. His expression also changed, his pupils constricting as a cold glint flashed in his eyes. Taking advantage of the time the divine cannons were accumulating power, he also accumulated divine power and was ready to attack. In the next moment, a deafening sound was heard. Boom! More than 300 divine cannons simultaneously spewed out multicolored divine power pillars, carrying with them the power to destroy Heaven and Earth as they ruthlessly bombarded Heaven and Earth Lord. At this moment, tens of thousands of miles of Heaven and Earth were illuminated by a blinding light. Even though Heaven and Earth Lord had the strength of a god emperor, he would be smashed to pieces if he was hit by the 300 divine power pillars. However, he was already prepared. The moment the divine power pillars appeared, he had already unleashed his divine power and moved nearly 5,000 miles to the left. Whoosh! 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 The divine power pillars were too fast. In just a quarter of an instant, they had swallowed up the area where Heaven and Earth Lord was. Although he had escaped in time, dodging most of the divine power pillars, more than 30 divine power pillars still hit him. However, there were still more than 30 divine light pillars that struck it. Along with its divine shield, the divine light shattered and filled the sky with fragments of divine light. Heaven and Earth Lord was also sent flying by the huge impact, deviating from his original path and landing unsteadily in the sky not far away. He had personally experienced the power of the Emperor-level battleship and knew that it was not to be trifled with, so he braced himself and went all out to deal with it. Filled with anger, he reformed his divine power shield and flapped his 2 pairs of wide wings as he sped towards the god-slaying battleship. He opened his mouth and spewed out scarlet flames that blotted out the sun. They poured down on the god-slaying battleship like a flood. The raging flames burned the sky, and several spatial cracks appeared in the sky. Layers of spatial ripples appeared. If the god-slaying battleship was engulfed by the flames, it would be very dangerous. However, Ji Tianqing was prepared for this, and he had already launched a second wave of attacks. He once again controlled god-slaying battleships divine power god-slaying battleships divine power. The god-slaying battleships in the sky was god-slaying battleships divine power god-slaying battleship. Boom! A slaying battleship. The loud bang 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 slaying battleship. The flames melted the countless beams of divine power, causing them to quickly dissipate. However, the numerous pillars of divine power also destroyed the divine flames that filled the sky, causing them to turn into millions of sparks that scattered down from the sky. Both attacks were extremely powerful, but they did not achieve the desired results. They cancelled each other out in the sky. When the Qinquan Lord saw that his attack had been so easily neutralized, he flew into a rage. Damn desolate race bastards, so what if you have a battleship? I don't believe that you won't consume resources when you launch an attack with a warship. Can your attack speed be faster than mine? Indeed, only the various divine temples of the desolate race had Emperor-class battleships. As for the beast race, they had no way to create a divine warship. They couldn't even create an imperial divine warship. In the past tens of thousands of years, the beast race and the experts of the two temples had fought and killed each other many times. What gave the beast race experts the most headaches were the battleships of the two temples. As long as they had enough resources and their warships weren't damaged or destroyed, they could continue to attack and bring great trouble to the beast race experts. However, although a battleship was a killing machine on the battlefield, it was not omnipotent. The most basic point was that a battleship needed a certain amount of time to launch an attack. It could take as long as a few seconds, or even 10 or 20 seconds. The shortest would be a few seconds. This was the experience that the beast race experts had accumulated over tens of thousands of years of fighting the desolate race experts. For example, the Qianquan Lord knew the weakness of the battleship, so he had grasped the technique to deal with the battleship. As the divine flames and divine power pillars of light collapsed and dissipated, the Qianquan Lord had already begun his next move. At his fastest speed, he circled around to the side of the god-slaying battleship. He raised his deer-like head and released hundreds of lightning pillars and dark red flame pillars that blasted at the battleship. The battleship was massive in size. Although it could fly very quickly, it was not agile enough to maneuver around in a small space. Even if Ji Tianqing personally piloted the god-slaying battleship, he was unable to overcome this inherent flaw. It was impossible for the battleship to turn around or change the direction of the divine cannons before accumulating energy to attack the Qianquan Lord. At this critical moment, Ji Tianqing could only temporarily give up on piloting the battleship. He released what little divine power he had left to condense a gigantic shield to block the Qianquan Lord's attack. Boom! Hundreds of lightning pillars and dark red flame pillars slammed into the gigantic shield, producing an earth-shattering boom that reverberated throughout the world. Ji Tianqing had yet to recover from his injuries and he was still very weak. After forming the divine power shield, it was very difficult for him to launch a counterattack against the Qianquan Lord within a second. As such, all he could do was block the Qianquan Lord's attack and protect the god-slaying battleship from being damaged. However, he had already prepared a plan. As he formed the shield, he sent a voice transmission to another god emperor. Pan Ruo, it's your turn. That's right. The trump card he had prepared in advance was Pan Ruo God Emperor. Although Pan Ruo God Emperor had been injured previously, she had recuperated in the distorted spacetime for so long that her injuries were more than half healed. Ji Tianqing had just told her his plan and she had agreed without hesitation. Furthermore, she had prepared herself. In fact, she already had a certain level of tacit understanding with Ji Tianqing. There was no need for Ji Tianqing to send her a voice transmission. The moment Ji Tianqing released his divine power and formed the shield, she had already charged out of the battleship and attacked the Qianquan Lord from the side. Swish! 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 She went all out, brandishing her sword and sending out more than 30 sword flashes. Using the sharpest and fiercest stance, she launched a surprise attack on the Qianquan Lord. Although the Qianquan Lord had been very careful and cautious in his actions, he had been wary of the god-slaying battleship. However, he had never expected that there would be two God Emperor experts hidden in the battleship. One of the God Emperor had formed the shield while the other God Emperor had launched a sneak attack on him. Chapter 47:35. No matter how powerful a God Emperor expert was, if he wasn't prepared and was caught off guard, he would be at a disadvantage if he was ambushed at close range. Moreover, the Heaven and Earth Overlord was not very strong. At the very least, he had not reached the upper realm of God Emperor. The difference in strength between him and the Prajna God Emperor was only 1 or 2 Dao rhymes. Boom! With a dull explosion, more than 30 dazzling sword flashes struck the Heaven and Earth Overlord, sending him flying. Its divine light shield was shattered, and more than a dozen bloody wounds were left on its body, spurting out more than a dozen blood flowers. Roar! In pain, the Heaven and Earth Overlord let out a furious roar and retreated 20,000 miles away from the god warship. He neutralized the impact of the sword flashes and hurriedly circulated his energy to suppress his injuries and expel the remaining sword chi in his body. Using this opportunity, the Prajna god emperor returned to the god-slaying battleship, and the battleship accelerated forward. This was naturally one of Ji Tianqing's plans. He had no intention of killing the heaven and earth overlord or severely injuring him. He only wanted to teach him a lesson so that he would retreat. Or perhaps, after lightly injuring him, he could use the battleship to escape while the heaven and earth overlord was treating his injuries and shake him off. Reality proved that Ji Tianqing's plan was not a problem, and it was successfully implemented. In a few short breaths, the heaven and earth overlord treated his injuries and circulated his energy to expel the remaining sword chi in his body. But by this time, the god-slaying battleship had already flown tens of thousands of miles away. Damn it! The heaven and earth overlord cursed angrily and hurriedly increased his speed. As a divine beast, Faolian's flying speed was unquestionable. Of course, it could surpass other divine beasts of the same realm. However, the distance between it and the god-slaying battleship had increased to 80,000 miles. It would be difficult to catch up in a short period of time. Both parties engaged in a chase high in the sky, neither concealing their tracks or auras. They flew as fast as lightning, shining with dazzling divine light and leaving a long trail of flames behind them. As time passed, the distance between the two parties narrowed bit by bit. As for the 500 elite god kings that the heaven and earth overlord had brought with him, they loyally carried out their orders and chased after the god-slaying battleship. However, due to their weak strength, they were unable to catch up to the heaven and earth overlord. Instead, the distance between them widened. However, with the Qinkuan overlord's orders, even if they knew they couldn't catch up, they couldn't give up. Unknowingly, half an hour passed. He watched as the heaven and earth lord exhausted all his strength and finally caught up to the god-slaying warship. When the distance between the two sides was 20,000 miles, it began to accumulate divine power, preparing to launch an attack. But at this moment, Ji Tianqing suddenly appeared. It was still the same old method as before. He suddenly put away the god-slaying battleship and used the so close, yet so far, divine ability. Thus, with a flash of white light, Ji Tianqing disappeared from the sky and reappeared hundreds of thousands of miles away. Then, he took out the god-slaying battleship and returned to the god-slaying battleship. It was still White Dragon driving the battleship, moving forward quickly and steadily. Heaven and Earth Lord was dumbfounded. He could not believe that the other party had escaped right under his nose. While it was stunned, it could only withdraw the divine power it had accumulated and continue chasing after the deity-slaying battleship. This time, the distance between the two sides had increased by hundreds of thousands of miles. If it wanted to catch up to the deity-slaying battleship again, it would take even longer. Encountering such a difficult opponent, the heaven and earth lord's unyielding nature was aroused. Anger surged in its heart. No matter which deity hall the other party was from, since they had sent a battleship and two god emperor experts into the unknown, they definitely couldn't be allowed to leave alive. But with its strength alone, it wasn't enough to intercept and kill the other party. Thus, as it chased after the deity-slaying battleship, it sent a message to the other two overlords, requesting their assistance as soon as possible. Of course, this would work. This was because if the deity-slaying battleship fled east, it would pass through the territory of one of the overlords. As for the other overlord, it would have enough time to rush over to the deity-slaying battleship's route. 4 hours later, the group chasing after the deity-slaying battleship grew larger and larger. At the front of this group was naturally the deity-slaying battleship. Following closely behind, the heaven and earth lord chased relentlessly in the sky hundreds of thousands of miles away. Further behind, there were more than 10 beast race leaders leading a large group of beast race godly monarchs 5 million miles away. They were also desperately chasing after the deity-slaying battleship. Continuing to look behind the group, there were 500 beast race elites under the heaven and earth lord who were 15 million miles away in the sky. They were also burying their heads in their journey. And at the back of the group, about 50 million miles away from the deity-slaying battleship, there were 7 beast race leaders. They were also rushing eastward as fast as lightning. At the same time, the second palace master, first palace master, and fifth palace master had already finished gathering. The 3 deity-slaying battleships were also flying at full speed, tearing through the sky as they rushed eastward in a grandiose manner. The 3 palace masters were the first to gather. Without hesitation, they chased into the unknown. As for the 3rd palace master, 4th palace master, and 6th palace master, they had also gathered at the borders of the unknown. Currently, they had also entered the unknown. However, it was absolutely impossible for them to catch up to Ji Tianqing. With the 1st palace master in the lead, the 3 deity-slaying battleships formed a majestic fleet that sped through the unknown. Along the way, countless beast race leaders and experts were alarmed. They all sent voice transmissions to the 3 beast race lords to report that the Taiyu Shrine's fleet had arrived and was launching a large-scale attack on the unknown. Although there were some beast race leaders who were bolder or whose blood had been stimulated, they dared to intercept and chase after the 1st palace master's fleet. However, these were all futile. They were too slow and were quickly shaken off by the fleet. Even if there were some divine abilities that barely managed to touch the 3 palace masters' battleships, they were easily neutralized and repelled. Just like that, the 1st palace master's fleet advanced triumphantly as if it was unstoppable. Another 2 hours later, the 1st palace master's fleet discovered something. In the sky ahead, there were 7 godly king realm beast race leaders. They were rushing as fast as lightning. Looking at their murderous postures, it did not seem like they were rushing over. Instead, it seemed like they were going to capture or kill someone. The 1st palace master decisively ordered the 2nd palace master and 5th palace master to kill a few beast race leaders and capture a few alive. After extorting confessions through torture or soul interrogation, the 1st palace master and the others figured out the reason. Just as they had guessed, a foreign tribe's deity-slaying battleship had entered the unknown and was fleeing toward the east. They were only following orders to intercept and provide support. There was no need for further questioning. The 1st palace master and the others immediately understood that the foreign tribe's deity-slaying battleship must be their target. Therefore, the 1st palace master killed the beast race leaders and threw their corpses into the wilderness. The fleet sped up and chased toward the east with murderous intent. After another few hours, the 1st palace master's fleet encountered another situation. In the sky ahead, there were 500 godly king realm beast race experts who were also rushing forward with all their might. The result was self-evident. Chapter 47-36. The 1st palace master, 2nd palace master, and 5th palace master all took action. With their strength, they easily killed more than half of the beast race experts. The remaining half of the beast race experts were captured and locked in the various divine warships. As the fleet continued to head east, the soldiers under the hall masters began to interrogate the beast race god kings. Most of the god kings of the beast race had managed to endure the torture, and there were even a few who had strong personalities who chose to commit suicide. However, a small number of beast race god kings still confessed. The 1st palace master used a soul assimilation technique to seize the memories of a few beast race god kings. As a result, the 3 palace masters understood that these elite beast race god kings were under the command of the heaven and earth overlord and were pursuing a divine worship of a foreign race. Other than heaven and earth lord, who was following closely behind the battleship, many beast leaders also rushed over from all directions to intercept and stop the divine battleship. This result was basically the same as the information they obtained from interrogating the beast race leaders. It also allowed the 3 palace masters to confirm that they were not going in the wrong direction. After confirming the outcome and the route, the 1st hall master gave the order for the 2 hall masters and the soldiers to kill all of the beast race's elite god kings. In any case, these beast race god kings had already lost their value. Killing them was as easy as squashing a few ants. After throwing the corpses of the beast race god kings into the forest, the fleet accelerated and headed east. Just like that, with the addition of a third force, the pursuit team became even more complicated. The heaven and earth overlord pursued the divine slaying warship relentlessly. At the same time, he sent a message to the other two overlords to inform them of the route and direction, urging them to hurry over. 10 million miles behind him, more than a dozen beast race leaders and a large group of beast race god kings were chasing with all their might. Another 10 million miles behind them was the fleet led by the first palace master. They were also rushing east at lightning speed. As time passed, this complicated pursuit team gradually passed through the heaven and earth overlord's territory and approached the next overlord's territory. At the same time, the other two overlords were also rushing at full speed towards the predetermined area. Based on the speed of the various parties, the fleet led by the first palace master would be able to catch up to the divine slaying warship in about 2 days. After a few more hours, the other two lords of the unknown lands would arrive at the designated area and encounter the god-slaying battleship and the first Hallmaster's fleet. It had been 2 days since Heaven and Earth Lord discovered the god-slaying battleship and began his pursuit. In these 2 days, he had caught up to the god-slaying battleship 9 times, but he was shaken off each time. As a result, he had expended a large amount of divine power and was mentally exhausted. However, he did not have the chance to attack because he was in a hurry. He was filled with rage, but he could not do anything to the god-slaying battleship. He sent a message to the two lords to ask when they would arrive to help. The two lords quickly replied, telling him not to worry and that they would arrive soon. Heaven and Earth Lord secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He thought to himself that when the two lords arrived, they would ambush and intercept the god-slaying battleship. Everything would be perfect. At that time, no matter how many tricks the other party had, they would not be able to escape from their palms. However, Heaven and Earth Lord never expected that just as he was rubbing his palms and preparing for a big battle, something unexpected would happen. In the sky behind him, a dazzling divine light was gradually approaching. Just by looking at it, one could only see a dazzling divine light. However, Heaven and Earth Lord released his divine perception and saw the scene in the divine light. When he saw the 3 god-slaying battleships in the divine light, he could not help but tremble. His expression turned ferocious as his eyes darkened. Damn alien bastards. They actually have accomplices. For battleships invading our territory. What are they trying to do? Without hesitation, Shenkuan Lord mixed the 3 warships behind him with the warship in front of him. Furthermore, he used his divine perception to see the insignia on the 3 battleships. He immediately recognized them as the flagship of the Taiyu Shrine's Hall Master. Based on his previous experience with the Taiyu Shrine, he knew that since the Taiyu Shrine's Hall Masters were here, there must be a large number of elite soldiers on the battleships. Looking at the other party's posture, they were most likely invading the unknown territory to seize this territory. Chapter 47-37. For tens of thousands of years, the temple masters of the Taiyu Shrine and the Pantheon of Immortality had ventured into the unknown lands many times. The 2 temples had indeed thought of conquering the unknown lands, but they had never succeeded. The environment of the unknown lands was harsh, and there were dangers everywhere. There were also endless beasts. Even if the temple masters of the 2 temples led thousands or tens of thousands of elite godly kings, they could only return in defeat under the siege of hundreds of thousands or millions of beasts. As time passed and the number of failures increased, the 2 temples would weigh the pros and cons. They felt that it was not worth it to lose elite troops for no reason. For nearly 10,000 years, the 2 temples had never launched a large-scale attack. Normally, there were only a few adventurers and scattered godly king experts that entered the unknown lands to train and explore. Even though the 3 factions had maintained peace for nearly 10,000 years, the beasts were always vigilant and guarded against the 2 temples. Now that the Taiyu Shrine's battleship had appeared, how could Heaven and Earth Lord not misunderstand? While he was anxious, he hurriedly sent a message to the other two lords, telling them that the Taiyu Shrine's army had invaded and that they should immediately send an elite army to support them. After sending the message, the Heaven and Earth Lord gave another order for the beast race leaders nearby to bring reinforcements over as soon as possible. That damn Taiyu Shrine. After being silent for nearly 10,000 years, they actually made a comeback. They really don't give up on their evil intentions. This time, blood will flow into rivers and corpses will be everywhere. Although Heaven and Earth Lord said words of pity and lamented the countless beasts that were about to die in battle, the beasts of the beasts were naturally innate. However, it was in the beast's nature to be warlike. Its blood was still boiling, and it was looking forward to it. Swoosh! Swoosh! The fleet led by the Temple Master's flagship had naturally discovered Heaven and Earth Lord. Apart from the Temple Master who had never personally led an expedition and had never seen Heaven and Earth Lord before, the other two Temple Masters recognized him. They hurriedly reported to the Temple Master about Heaven and Earth Lord's identity and related information. The Grand Palace Master was very confident and gave the order in an imposing manner. Don't bother about that ugly snake. Our target is that strange race youth. Heaven and Earth Lord has been chasing after that alien youth. Since we have caught up to him, it means that the alien youth is not far ahead. He ignored the Heaven and Earth Overlord and sped up to find that foreign race youth as soon as possible. If the Qinkuan Overlord dares to spoil our plans, then we'll kill him as well. The Lord Hallmaster's words were very domineering, but he was an upper realm god emperor, so he had the right to be domineering. Thus, the three warships spared no expense and increased their speed to the maximum. The speed of the entire fleet increased by about 10%, and the effect was very obvious. Heaven and Earth Lord, who was flying at full speed ahead, naturally felt the fleet's acceleration, and his face turned gloomy. Damn it! The battleships of the Taiyu Shrine are even faster than I am. At this rate, they will be able to catch up to me in less than 100 breaths. He had to think of a way to obstruct them. Otherwise, if the four battleships join forces and attack me from the front and back, won't I be dead for sure? Heaven and Earth Lord liked to fight, but he was not stupid or reckless. Now that things had developed to this stage, he would not sit still and wait for death. Of course, he chose to take the initiative to attack. Swoosh! Swoosh swoosh! He quickly accumulated a large amount of divine power and suddenly turned to look at the three battleships. Through the antlers on his head, he released thousands of lightning pillars and huge flaming swords that filled the sky. Although there was still a distance of 60 to 70,000 miles between him and the fleet. But if the fleet followed closely behind him, it was equivalent to colliding head-on with the thousands of lightning pillars and hundreds of flaming swords. The two of them moved in opposite directions, and the time taken was even shorter, leaving not much time for the fleet to react. Moreover, with the Lord Hallmaster personally overseeing, the morale of the entire fleet's soldiers was high, and their confidence multiplied. They did not take the Heaven and Earth Lord seriously at all, and they did not expect him to be so bold as to attack them first. When the soldiers controlling the battleships saw the lightning pillars and flaming swords flying towards them, they were stunned for a moment. Even if they immediately came back to their senses and activated the array as quickly as possible to intercept the divine powers and secret skills, it was already too late. Boom boom boom. Bam bam bam. A deafening sound exploded, reverberating between heaven and earth. Hundreds of lightning pillars and flaming swords ruthlessly struck the three divine battleships. In the sky and on the ground, the space within a radius of 10,000 miles was immediately filled with endless lightning and fire. The destructive shockwaves spread out in all directions along with countless fragments of divine light. The surrounding mountains and forests within a radius of tens of thousands of miles were destroyed on the spot, causing smoke and dust to fill the sky. The three battleships were sent flying by the shockwaves, tumbling towards the ruins. Fortunately, the three Hullmasters acted in time and used their powerful divine powers to neutralize the terrifying shockwaves, stabilizing the battleships and preventing them from falling into the ruins. Of course, no matter how strong the battleship's defenses were, they could not be undamaged after suffering such a powerful attack. Craters and cracks appeared on the surface of each battleship. Fortunately, these were all external injuries and did not affect the normal use of the battleships. A large number of godly king experts quickly cast spells to repair the damage to the battleships. The Heaven and Earth Lord had achieved his goal. After casting spells to attack the three battleships, he laughed coldly and flew away. The three battleships were pushed back 1,000 miles. Stabilizing the formation, repairing the damage, and then speeding towards the east wasted a lot of time. The distance between the fleet and the Heaven and Earth Lord was increased to tens of thousands of miles. The distance between the fleet and the god-slaying battleships was increased to more than 300,000 miles. The Heaven and Earth Lord did this to buy time for himself and also unintentionally to buy more time for Ji Tianqing. The three warships that had rejoined the chase became even more aggressive. Not only were the soldiers on the battleships furious, but even the three Hullmasters were furious. They swore to kill the Heaven and Earth Lord to establish their dominance. Damned beast, we've already spared its life by ignoring it, yet it still dares to attack us? Since it's seeking its own death, I'll grant it its wish. It's chasing that alien youth. We have the same goal. How can it be so stupid to attack us? Beasts have always been ignorant and stubborn. With their brains and intelligence, how can they understand that an enemy's enemy is a friend? Forget it. It's just a lowly beast. Even if it has the same goal as us, it has no right to be our friend. Perhaps the Heaven and Earth Lord is determined to get that alien youth and does not want us to get involved. Since it wants to snatch him from us, we can't let it off. We have to retaliate and teach it a lesson. Speed up and chase after it. Let's kill it first. Chapter 47-38. The three temple masters gave the order, and the fleet sped up to chase after the Heaven and Earth Lord. After another 15 minutes, the fleet finally caught up with the Heaven and Earth Lord. The two were less than 30,000 miles apart. This time, the soldiers controlling the warships were on high alert. They had already formed a defensive shield around the warships, so they were not afraid of the Heaven and Earth Lord's sudden attack. Under the control of the many soldiers, the warships accumulated a vast amount of power. They all opened their divine cannons and locked onto the Heaven and Earth Lord. The Heaven and Earth Lord, who was rushing with all his might, felt immense pressure. He immediately tensed up. Of course, he knew that there was no way he could dodge the three warships firing at him at the same time. With the power of the three warships, even if they could not kill him on the spot, they could severely injure him and cause his strength to drop greatly. Therefore, the Heaven and Earth Lord decisively chose to escape and temporarily avoid the attack. Knowing that the other party outnumbered him and that his reinforcements had not arrived, he did not want to tangle with the Taiyu Shrine's fleet. Swoosh! He decisively left the pursuing team and teleported 40,000 miles to the side, hoping to escape the fleet's pursuit. Boom! 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 With a series of dull explosions, the three warships simultaneously spewed out divine power pillars. They carried the power to destroy the heavens and earth as they blasted toward the Heaven and Earth Lord's location. The world within tens of thousands of miles was illuminated, and violent divine power fluctuations spread far and wide. However, the thousands of dazzling light pillars all missed their target and bombarded the ground and the mountain range. More than 10 mountain ranges and 30,000 miles of land were reduced to ruins. Thick smoke and dust surged between heaven and earth. Even though dozens of light pillars brushed past the Heaven and Earth Lord, they didn't cause any harm to him. All they did was shatter his protective divine light. Damn foreign race bastards! When my reinforcements arrive, I'll teach you a lesson. The Heaven and Earth Lord flew forward, turning his head to glare at the 3 warships and cursing fiercely. Within the 3 warships, the 3 temple masters' expressions turned ugly when they saw that the warships' attacks had missed. They scolded their subordinates. However, they did not plan to continue pursuing the Heaven and Earth Lord. Since the Heaven and Earth Lord had tactfully moved aside and had no intention of attacking or obstructing the fleet, they would temporarily spare his life. Whoosh! The fleet gradually increased its speed to chase after the god-slaying battleship. The first palace master had already used his divine sense to detect that there was a warship flying at high speed 360,000 kilometers ahead. The battleship didn't have any emblems, and its shape and style were different from the Taiyu shrines. It should be the battleship of the alien god emperor. As time passed, 6 hours later, the distance between the fleet and the god-slaying battleship gradually shortened from 360,000 li to 280,000 li. At this time, White Dragon, who was piloting the god-slaying battleship, still hadn't discovered the Taiyu Shrine's fleet and was still flying at the same speed as before. Meanwhile, Ji Tianqing was recuperating in the distorted spacetime of the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes Pagoda. He was unaware of the outside world for the time being. But there was one thing that was more interesting. Heaven and Earth Lord avoided the Taiyu Shrine fleet, but it did not give up on chasing the god-slaying battleship. It only changed its route and continued to chase after them from the left side of the fleet's route, about 80,000 kilometers away. Now, the Taiyu Shrine's fleet had caught up to it and was on par with it. Both sides were chasing after the Taiyu Shrine's fleet. They were on the same line, just 80,000 kilometers apart. Since Heaven and Earth Lord could monitor the fleet, the 3 palace masters on the battleship could also monitor Heaven and Earth Lord's every move. Of course, this situation was only temporary. The fleet's speed was faster than Heaven and Earth Lord's. The distance between the two was bound to widen. The 3 palace masters still didn't think much of Heaven and Earth Lord, but the soldiers under them didn't dare to be careless. They were still on guard against Heaven and Earth Lord, maintaining their vigilance at all times. As for Heaven and Earth Lord, it was laughing coldly in its heart. Hee hee. My reinforcements are about to arrive. You're dead meat. As expected. In a short 15 minutes, the god-slaying battleship at the front of the fleet encountered an unexpected situation. White Dragon was piloting the god-slaying battleship to the east. Suddenly, it saw a dazzling god-slaying light in the sky ahead of it. The dazzling god-slaying light only used a few breaths' time to travel from 80,000 kilometers away to 50,000 kilometers away from the battleship. White Dragon instantly understood that it wasn't the Taiyu Shrine's battleship, but the god emperor of the beast race. He hurriedly controlled the array to speed up the god-slaying battleship's escape. It also dodged 20,000 kilometers to the right. At the same time, he hurriedly woke up Ji Tianqing, who was recuperating in the god-slaying pagoda. Master, there's another god emperor attacking. It should be the beast race. In the distorted spacetime of the god-slaying pagoda, Ji Tianqing was busy recuperating. Previously, he had fought for 2 days and a few hours. He had already been recuperating in the distorted spacetime for close to 4 months. Now, his injuries had stabilized and he had recovered 70%. He had the strength to fight again. After hearing White Dragon's report, he hurriedly stopped recuperating and left Jiutian 10 Absolutes Pagoda. Swoosh! With a flash of white light, Ji Tianqing appeared in the cockpit of the god-slaying battleship. There was no need for White Dragon to report anything. He immediately released his divine sense to investigate the situation around him. When his divine sense spread out, the first thing he detected was the divine light that was charging toward him from the left. In the multicolored divine light that was like a cloud, there was a giant beast that was as black as ink and exuded a chilling aura. It exuded the majestic aura of a god emperor. White Dragon's guess was right. It was indeed the god emperor of the beast race. Moreover, Ji Tianqing could also tell that it was a mid-level god emperor. Its strength was no weaker than the heaven and earth overlord of the beast race. Immediately after, his divine sense spread out more than 20,000 kilometers and sensed the existence of 3 battleships. The auras of the 3 Emperor-level battleships were very powerful. They were arranged in a formation and seemed to be well-trained and well-coordinated. Qi Tianqing's expression changed on the spot. His pupils constricted and his gaze became serious. It's the Taiyu Shrine. The fleet formed by the 3 Palace Masters' battleships is about to catch up. He had never expected that the Taiyu Shrine's fleet would catch up to him after escaping with all his might and finally entering the unknown land. The speed of the fleet and the precision of their tracking made him feel incredulous. He could immediately determine that there must be a core figure of the Taiyu Shrine in the 3 battleships. It was either the 2nd Palace Master or the 1st Palace Master himself. Only these 2 key figures had such strength and means. His divine sense had also detected that the heaven and earth overlord was also doing his best to catch up tens of thousands of kilometers to the left of the fleet. But in comparison, the threat that the 2 beast race overlords brought to him was far less than the 3 battleships. Chapter 47-39. What should I do? The beast race god emperor was attacking from the front, and the Taiyu Shrine's fleet was chasing after him from behind. Qi Tianqing's current situation was truly hanging by a thread. It was extremely dangerous. He frowned as he pondered. A cold glint flashed across his eyes. At this moment, the pitch-black beast on the left was only 30,000 miles away from the god-slaying battleship. It was the overlord of the beast race in the north of this unknown land. Its name was Dark Wilderness. Dark Wilderness Overlord was at the middle stage of the God Emperor. It had condensed 6 Taoist rhymes and was one of the stronger overlords. It was also because of this that it was able to arrive at the battlefield faster than the other overlord. Previously, when the Heaven and Earth Overlord had sent it a message, it had explained the situation of the enemy battleship. Therefore, after it discovered the god-slaying battleship, it locked onto it. Now that it was 30,000 miles away, it exploded with an earth-shattering aura. It waved its huge claws and shot out 3 crescent-shaped light blades toward the god-slaying battleship. Swish! 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 The 3 crescent-shaped light blades were extremely fast. They instantly streaked across the sky and arrived in front of the god-slaying battleship. However, the White Dragon was already prepared. It had already activated the god-slaying battleship's defensive light barrier and dodged. Unfortunately, the crescent-shaped light blades were too fast. The god-slaying battleship dodged one of them but was still hit by 2 of them. Boom! Crack! The 2 crescent-shaped light blades struck the god-slaying battleship at the same time. There was a deafening explosion that spread across tens of thousands of miles. Countless fragments of divine light exploded and splashed in all directions, raining down in a voluminous manner. Not only did the 2 crescent-shaped light blades collapse, but even the god-slaying battleship's divine light barrier was mostly shattered. The powerful impact pushed the god-slaying battleship thousands of miles away. It rolled a few times before it stabilized. Then, the White Dragon controlled the god-slaying battleship and sped up. At this time, he definitely wouldn't tangle with the Dark Wilderness Overlord to prevent the Taiyu Shrine's fleet from catching up. The Dark Wilderness Overlord used a divine power to push the god-slaying battleship back thousands of miles, successfully delaying it for 2 breaths of time. Just as it was about to unleash its divine abilities and secret techniques to launch a fierce attack on the god-slaying battleship, it realized that the god-slaying battleship had no intention of fighting back. It had actually sped up and fled. Didn't Qian Kun say that there were 2 god emperors in this battleship? Why didn't you fight with us? Why did you run away without hesitation? Isn't he too cowardly? The underworld lord muttered in his heart, feeling that this matter was a little strange. Where's Qian Kun? Isn't it following this battleship? Thinking of the Heaven and Earth Overlord, it released its divine perception to scan the surroundings, searching for traces of the heaven and earth overlord. Sure enough, it soon found the Qiankun Lord, who was hundreds of thousands of miles behind him. At the same time, it also discovered the 3 battleships belonging to the Taiyu Shrine. Reality proved that heaven and earth overlord was not lying. That was indeed a battleship from the Taiyu Shrine. As expected, the Taiyu Shrine sent out 4 battleships to form a fleet to invade the unknown lands. While the Lord of the Underworld was furious, he also felt more and more puzzled. That's even more strange. The Taiyu Shrine sent out 4 battleships, which means that at least 4 palace masters are here. There's only me and Qian Kun here, so why don't they dare to fight? As these thoughts flashed through his mind, the Lord of the Underworld did not forget to chase after the god-slaying battleship. On the other side, the 3 palace masters of the fleet also saw the Lord of the Underworld and the scene of it attacking the god-slaying battleship. This surprised the 3 palace masters. They thought to themselves, the heaven and earth overlord actually called for reinforcements. Looking at the appearance of that giant beast, it should be the Lord of the Underworld. The Lord of the Underworld attacked the God Emperor's battleship and successfully delayed the God Emperor's footsteps. This is creating an opportunity for us. Now that things had developed to this point, the 3 palace masters were even more confident that they could catch Ji Tianqing in a short period of time. Soon, another half an hour passed. The chasing team crossed thousands of mountains and rivers, and the distance between them was still shrinking. The Lord of the Underworld gave chase with all its might. It was still more than 30,000 miles away from the god-slaying battleship, and it would soon be able to launch another attack. The Taiyu Shrine's fleet was only 120,000 miles away from the god-slaying battleship. The Lord of the Heaven and Earth's speed was slightly slower, and the Taiyu Shrine's fleet was 50,000 miles away. But at this time, Ji Tianqing and the White Dragon encountered a new danger. A dazzling divine light appeared in the front right of the god-slaying battleship, and it rushed over as fast as lightning. Within that divine light was a giant beast that was 30 meters tall and looked like a unicorn. Its entire body was covered in dark golden scales, and the horn on its head was like a dragon's horn, shining with golden light. 2 broad wings grew from its shoulders, and they flapped rapidly. With each flap, it could fly thousands of miles away. As it flew with all its might, it left a long trail of flames behind it. Divine light flickered, and it emitted the aura of a God Emperor expert. Without a doubt, this was another God Emperor expert of the beast race. At the same time, it was also the 3rd overlord of the unknown lands, the Golden Horse. Of course, the Golden Horse was just a name, not the name of its race. The Golden Horse overlord was also an intermediate God Emperor, but it had only condensed 5 Taoist rhymes, so it was slightly weaker than the Underworld overlord. Even so, it still locked onto the god-slaying battleship with murderous intent, and its entire body emitted terrifying killing intent. When it was only 30,000 miles away from the god-slaying battleship, it also attacked without hesitation like the Underworld overlord. It flapped its broad wings, releasing thousands of divine light blades, and began to attack the god-slaying battleship. It opened its bloody mouth and spat out 10 pillars of divine fire, which fiercely bombarded the god-slaying battleship. It used all its strength to release these divine abilities and spell techniques, and their power was extremely terrifying. However, when it appeared, Ji Tianqing and the White Dragon discovered it. Therefore, when it attacked, Ji Tianqing and the White Dragon had already made a countermeasure. On one hand, the White Dragon controlled the god-slaying battleship and condensed a powerful defensive barrier. On the other hand, Ji Tianqing also made a move in time. He waved the Burial of Heaven and slashed out a dozen sword lights that could split heaven and earth apart to meet the Golden Horse Overlord's attack. Boom! Rumble! In the next moment, the sky full of divine light blades and flaming light pillars collided with the dozen or so giant swords, and a deafening sound burst out. Most of the divine light blades and flaming light pillars were defeated and dissolved. The dozen or so giant swords that Ji Tianqing slashed out also collapsed and shattered. The remaining few divine light blades and flaming light pillars hit the god-slaying battleship, but they were also blocked by the divine light barrier. This time, the divine light barrier was not destroyed, and only a few cracks and dents were left. The god-slaying battleship shook violently a few times before quickly calming down, and its flying speed did not decrease at all. The Golden Horse Overlord's interception and attack did not have much of an effect. It only delayed the god-slaying battleship for a breath of time, which made the Golden Horse Overlord feel a little depressed. It was unwilling to accept this, and it was also afraid that the Underworld Overlord and the Heaven and Earth Overlord would laugh at it, so it angrily chased after the god-slaying battleship and continued to attack and kill. Chapter 47-40. With the Golden Horse Overlord's strength, it would be difficult for him to catch up to the God-Slayer warship in a short period of time. However, he persevered and followed closely behind the God-Slayer warship, ready to attack at any time. The pursuit team became more complicated. Not only were there 3 divine warships from the Taiyu Shrine, but there were also 3 God-Emperor powerhouses of the Orc race. Moreover, the distance between these powerhouses and the warship was rapidly closing. A fierce battle could break out at any time. Ji Tianqing knew that whether it was the 3 divine warships from the Taiyu Shrine or the 3 God-Emperor of the Orc race, they were all his opponents. The 3 temple masters of the Taiyu Shrine also knew that their target was Ji Tianqing, not the 3 God-Emperor of the Orc race. Of course, if the 3 God-Emperor of the Orc race dared to stop them, they would not be polite. However, the 3 Orc race overlords still did not understand the situation. They thought that Ji Tianqing's Godslayer warship was the same as the 3 divine warships, which were all from the Taiyu Shrine. Therefore, they were under great pressure. While chasing, they did not forget to send messages to discuss countermeasures. They were also worried that if the 4 divine warships surrounded them and attacked them with all their strength, what would they do? The result was obvious. This special team was on guard against each other during the pursuit. They were all very cautious and vigilant. Ji Tianqing was fine. He only cared about moving forward with all his strength. However, the 3 God-Emperor of the Orc race's feelings were very complicated. They had already seen that the 4 divine warships of the Taiyu Shrine had invaded an unknown place at the same time. They must have an unknown purpose. No matter how strong the other party was, they could not endure and retreat. They had to intercept them. Even if they could not win, they had to think of a way to minimize the losses and harm to the Orc race. Not long after, the fleet of the Taiyu Shrine was faster and gradually approached the Underworld Lord and the Golden Horse Overlord. Although the 3 Temple Masters' target was the God-Slayer warship and did not want to be entangled with the God-Emperor of the Orc race too much. However, both sides were on the same level and were too close to each other. This made Underworld and Golden Horse Overlord feel an intense pressure and danger. Yu Huang and Golden Horse Overlord finally couldn't bear it any longer. After discussing secretly with each other, they attacked at the same time, releasing their divine skills that could destroy heaven and earth, blasting towards the 3 battleships. Swish! Swish! Dazzling divine light flared up, covering the sky and the sun. Countless divine light blades, ice flames poured down like a flood, swallowing the 3 battleships. Fortunately, the soldiers operating the 3 warships were prepared. Not only did they form a defensive shield, but they also activated the divine cannons at the critical moment, releasing hundreds of divine light beams. Boom boom boom. In the next moment, more than 1,000 pillars of divine power collided with the sharp blades of divine light in the sky, producing a deafening explosion. The fragments of divine light that filled the sky exploded and rained down like a torrential downpour. The violent impact turned into rings of 5-colored ripples that spread out in all directions. The defensive shields of the 3 divine warships were also shattered and collapsed on the spot. The attacks of the two beast race god emperor didn't cause any substantial damage to the Taiyu Shrine's fleet. However, the three palace masters couldn't bear the provocation of the beast race god emperor. No matter what, they had to fight back. They couldn't just swallow their anger. Reckless fools, kill them. Those two idiots will always hinder us. Let's just kill them. The first palace master and second palace master were filled with anger as they gave the order. The soldiers operating the battleships hurriedly complied and activated the divine robes on the battleships, initiating the attack. In order to neutralize the attack of the two beast race god emperor, the three divine warships had already released their divine robes. This time, not only did the divine cannons fire, but the three battleships also released destructive lightning beams and endless divine flames. The sky was covered, and the dazzling divine light enveloped a radius of 30,000 miles. At the same time, the destructive divine light beams and divine technique attacks locked onto the auras of the two beast race god emperor. Even though the Underworld Lord and Golden Horse Lord sensed the danger and the threat of death and hurriedly fled and dodged, it was useless. Boom boom boom. In the next moment, divine light pillars and divine ability attacks covered the sky and covered the earth, drowning the figures of the two lords. Their divine power shields were shattered into pieces, and countless divine light shards flew everywhere. The incomparably violent impact sent them flying, tumbling several thousand miles away. Even though they dodged most of the attacks, they were still injured. Plop! Plop! The Dark Wilderness Horde Lord and the Golden Horse Horde Lord crashed into a mountain range, smashing the towering mountain peak. Both of them were covered in dust, and they were in a sorry state. They even spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. However, they didn't dare to waste any time. They hurriedly flew out of the ruins and accelerated into the distance. The three battleships of the Taiyu Shrine chased after them. After closing the distance, they were about to launch another attack. The Underworld Lord and Golden Horse Lord were already injured. How could they dare to resist the attacks of the three divine battleships? They could only deviate from their forward route and fly to the side, hoping to escape the pursuit of the three battleships. In this way, they gave up chasing after the god-slaying battleships and focused on saving their lives. In the three battleships of the Taiyu Shrine, the soldiers operating the battleships were in a dilemma. Just now, the three temple masters had given the order to kill the Underworld Lord and Golden Horse Lord as soon as possible and get rid of these two troublesome fellows. However, before that, the fleet's primary goal was to chase after the god-slaying battleships. Now that the Underworld Lord and Golden Horse Lord had changed their escape route, should the fleet continue to chase after them? If they chased after them, they would definitely delay and increase the distance between them and the god-slaying battleships. However, if they didn't chase after them, they could only watch them escape. The soldiers hesitated for a moment, and the speed of the three battleships naturally slowed down. However, the generals suddenly came to a realization and thought of a problem. Since the three temple masters didn't say anything, it meant that, before the three temple masters gave a new order, they had to obey the previous order. Therefore, the soldiers operated the three battleships and accelerated to chase after the Underworld Lord and Golden Horse Lord. 20 breaths later, both sides had deviated from the escape route of the god-slaying battleships, but the distance between them had narrowed. The three battleships opened fire at the same time, releasing an overwhelming divine light beam and dazzling divine light that poured down on the Underworld Lord and Golden Horse Lord. The Underworld Lord and Golden Horse Lord's faces changed on the spot. While they were full of fear, they couldn't help but curse. Damn it! The bastards of the Taiyu Shrine, relying on a few battleships, they are actually so arrogant. If the temple masters of the Taiyu Shrine fought with them, even if they lost, they could only blame themselves for being inferior. However, the other side didn't show up and only used the battleships to deal with them. This made them very unconvinced and aggrieved. Chapter 47-41 When the thousands of divine power light pillars and divine art light filled the sky, the two lords knew that the situation was hopeless. With their strength and methods, they could not stop or defeat the Taiyu Shrine's fleet. The only thing they could do now was to neutralize the enemy's attack and save their lives. Once they escaped and were out of danger, they could gather a large number of elite orcs to deal with the Taiyu Shrine's fleet. Boom! 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 In the next moment, the divine skill light beams engulfed Underworld and Golden Horse Lord. Amidst a deafening muffled sound, countless fragments of divine light burst out and scattered towards the ground like a fairy scattering flowers. The two overlords were also sent flying, tumbling several thousand miles away. However, they were prepared this time and did not suffer serious injuries. After flying for 5,000 miles, they neutralized the impact and sped up to escape into the distance. In the three warships, the soldiers in charge of operating the warships were all excited and did not hesitate to pursue and attack. But at this moment, the first Hallmaster gave an order. Don't chase a cornered enemy. Turn back and continue to pursue that alien youth. In the minds of the Hallmasters, chasing and capturing Ji Tianqing was their primary goal. As for the three orc lords, if they were in the way, they would get rid of them. If they were not in the way, they could just ignore them. After receiving the order, the soldiers operating the warships turned around and flew east to catch up with the god-slaying warship. However, the fleet had deviated from their original route and was delayed for some time. The distance between them and the god-slaying warship had increased to 300,000 miles. What made the three Hallmasters even angrier was that Ji Tianqing had sensed that the opportunity had come. He actually put away the god-slaying warship and used the ultimate skill, so close, yet so far. The result was obvious. A white light flashed in the sky, and Ji Tianqing's figure disappeared. In the next moment, he crossed 140,000 miles and appeared in the distant sky. In this way, the distance between him and the Taiyu Shrine's fleet had increased to 440,000 miles. With the strength of the second Palace Master and the fifth Palace Master, even if they extended their divine consciousness to the furthest extent, they would not be able to sense his existence. Only the first Palace Master, who was the strongest among them, was able to use his divine sense to search for Ji Tianqing more than 400,000 miles away. Ji Tianqing used the so close, yet worlds apart, technique to distance himself from the Taiyu Shrine's fleet. He had expected that none of the Palace Masters, including the second Palace Master, would be able to detect his location and tracks. At this time, he should adjust his direction and change his escape route so that he could shake off the Taiyu Shrine's fleet. However, he thought of a problem, or rather, a detail. Previously, he was only 120,000 miles away from the three battleships of the Taiyu Shrine. At that time, he had released his deity perception to investigate the three deity warships. He had seen the second Hall Master's warship among them. Although the three divine warships belonged to the Taiyu Shrine and belonged to the various temple masters, they all had the insignia of the Taiyu Shrine. Apart from that, each divine warship had a different appearance and a unique insignia. As long as one observed carefully, they would be able to discover the differences between the divine warships and distinguish which warship belonged to which temple master. Other than the second Palace Master's warship, the other warships belonged to the fifth Palace Master or the sixth Palace Master. However, the warship in the lead was the most sacred and mighty. It was even more majestic and dignified than the second Palace Master's warship. Ji Tianqing couldn't help but wonder whose ship that battleship belonged to. Not only was it more powerful and faster than the second Palace Master's warship, but it was also ranked first in the fleet. There must be a problem. If the second Palace Master was the leader of this hunting mission, then his warship would definitely be ranked first. However, the second Palace Master's warship was ranked second. This meant that, the owner of the first warship was more powerful and honorable than the second Palace Master. The answer was obvious. First Palace Master. It must be him. He actually took action personally. When he came to this conclusion, Ji Tianqing was extremely shocked. He had previously suspected that the first palace master might be in charge of this hunting mission. Otherwise, the Taiyu Shrine's fleet would not have been able to catch up with him after entering the unknown land. However, when he came to this conclusion, he still found it hard to believe. If the first palace master took action personally, then the Taiyu Shrine would have turned out in full force. Since they have made such a huge decision, they must have been determined to get me. This is definitely not to avenge Dao Xingyun, nor to protect the reputation of the Taiyu Shrine. It must be the first palace master who saw my outstanding talent and suspected that I was the one chosen by heaven. That's why he made such a big fuss. Now that things had developed to this point, even though Ji Tianqing had not seen the first palace master with his own eyes, he had guessed the answer through speculation and analysis. Since the first palace master was in that fleet, the pressure on him would be greater, and he would be more cautious. A distance of 440,000 miles was a range that the other palace masters could not explore with their divine senses. However, the first palace master's strength was unfathomable. 440,000 miles might not be safe. Thus, Ji Tianqing flew in the sky with all his might, silently accumulating divine power in preparation for the next space diversion. In times of danger, he would travel personally, and his speed would be faster than the god-slaying battleship. However, when the situation was safe, he would still use the god-slaying battleship to travel. This was the same as all the other god-emperor experts. After all, traveling personally was very fast, but it would also consume more divine power, and it would not last for long. Although using the god-slaying battleship to travel was slower, as long as he had sufficient cultivation resources, he could last for a long time. Unknowingly, another 15 minutes had passed. During this period of time, Ji Tianqing and the Taiyu Shrine's fleet had crossed thousands of mountains and rivers. The distance between the two sides was also shrinking, shortening to 380,000 miles. However, Ji Tianqing had also accumulated enough divine power, and his preparations were very sufficient. Swoosh! With a flash of white light, he once again used the "so close, yet so far" technique and disappeared from the sky. In the next instant, he had teleported 140,000 miles and appeared in the distant horizon. This way, the distance between him and the fleet had increased to 520,000 miles. He was 100% sure of one thing. No matter how strong the first palace master was, his divine sense could not reach more than 500,000 miles. After all, 500,000 miles was a threshold, and it was also the limit that all God-Emperor experts could reach with their divine senses. Thus, Ji Tianqing decisively changed his direction and escape route. He was still flying east, and his goal was still to pass through the unknown land and reach the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality. However, if he deviated more than 100,000 miles to the southeast, the Taiyu Shrine's fleet would completely lose track of him. Even if the palace masters realized that the situation was not good, they would use their divine senses and secret techniques to search for the divine power fluctuations and aura he left behind. It would also waste a lot of time. Chapter 47-42. Previously, when they were chasing after the deity-slaying warship, the second palace master had warned the first palace master that the foreign race youth was strong and had many tricks up his sleeve. However, the Lord Palace Master had never fought with Ji Tianqing before, and neither of them had met face to face. In the eyes of the Lord Hall Master, even if the other party was the one chosen by heaven, he was only at the middle level of God Emperor. How strong could he be? The first palace master did not take it to heart, and the hunting operation was carried out step by step. That was until Ji Tianqing used the "so close, yet worlds apart" technique, which increased the distance between them to over 500,000 kilometers. When the first palace master's spiritual sense could not find any trace of Ji Tianqing, he knew that the situation was not good. Damn it! That kid is indeed somewhat strange. He's actually able to execute the spatial teleportation technique twice in a row within 15 minutes. After personally witnessing Ji Tianqing's methods, the first palace master understood why the second palace master gave him such a high evaluation. However, it was too late to discuss this matter now. The first palace master could only order the fleet to advance at full speed. At the same time, he frowned and pondered, trying to figure out Ji Tianqing's escape route. Although that kid can perform spatial shifting twice in a quarter of an hour, he can't do it. However, that kind of divine ability would inflict severe backlash on himself, and he couldn't cast it multiple times in a row. In the end, he still had to rely on the divine warship to escape from the unknown land and enter the pantheon of immortality's sphere of influence. The first palace master stood in the cockpit of the flagship. He stared coldly at the sky before him, frowning as he pondered. That kid knows very well that if he uses a divine warship to travel, it will never be able to match our fleet speed. If he had flown in a straight line, he would never have been able to shake us off. We would have caught up to him sooner or later. Therefore, after he used spatial diversion to distance himself from us, he will definitely change his escape route. What had happened in the past year proved that the Lord Hallmaster's wisdom and strategy were not inferior to Ji Tianqing's. It was precisely because of this that Ji Tianqing was in such a difficult situation. He had truly met his match. Shua! The three divine warships flew across the sky at lightning speed. In just a short while, they had crossed over 500,000 miles. At this time, the fleet stopped in the sky. Without waiting for the first palace master to give the order, the second palace master took the initiative to perform a divine power secret technique to search for the remaining divine power ripples and auras in the world. Previously, Ji Tianqing had escaped the pursuit of the Taiyu Shrine and quietly entered the unknown lands. But in the end, the Taiyu Shrine's fleet still caught up with him, and the biggest credit went to the second palace master. Now that the second palace master was using the same trick again, it could be said that he was very familiar with it. After a short period of 20 breaths, the second palace master found the result. In the sky in front of the fleet, there was a shallow trace that extended to tens of thousands of kilometers away like a thin mist and began to turn toward the southeast. That kid really changed his escape route and went southeast. After the second palace master reported the results, the fleet changed direction and headed southeast. Moments later, the fleet flew 400,000 kilometers to the southeast and stopped in the sky again. The second palace master used his divine ability and secret technique to search for the traces of divine power left behind by Ji Tianqing in the sky. After 20 breaths of searching, the second palace master found the divine power ripples and auras left behind by Ji Tianqing. However, the fleet flew over the head, and Ji Tianqing only flew 180,000 kilometers to the southeast before continuing to fly east. So, the fleet turned back and followed the traces left by Ji Tianqing to the east. Logically speaking, the fleet only needed to fly in a straight line to the east and soon catch up with Ji Tianqing. But the first palace master was very cautious. He speculated that Ji Tianqing would not be so stupid and would definitely change direction a few more times in the escape route. Therefore, every hour the fleet traveled, he would ask the second palace master to use his divine ability and secret technique to search for the divine power ripples and auras left behind by Ji Tianqing. Although it would waste a lot of time, it was the safest way. At least they would not lose track of him. In the first 2 hours, the second palace master used his divine ability and secret technique twice to search for the traces left behind by Ji Tianqing. He was sure that Ji Tianqing did not change his route. However, when the second palace master used his divine ability and secret technique for the third time, he found that the traces of Ji Tianqing's divine power had disappeared. This proved that Ji Tianqing had changed his route. The fleet could only return the way they came. Every 1,000,000 kilometers, the second palace master would use his divine ability to search. After using his divine ability to search for too many times, the second palace master's divine power was exhausted and he could not hold on any longer. At this time, the first palace master could only use his own divine ability and secret technique to search for the traces left by Ji Tianqing. After 3 hours, the fleet finally found the divine power ripples and auras left by Ji Tianqing. So, the fleet continued on their journey and followed the traces left by Ji Tianqing to the east. However, the fleet had been delayed for such a long time that Ji Tianqing had long left them in the dust. As time passed, the distance between the two parties increased. After half a day, even if the first palace master and the second palace master used their divine ability in secret technique again, it was difficult to find the traces left by Ji Tianqing. After all, the divine power ripples and auras he left behind were very weak and would fade and disappear in 2 to 4 hours. Since they could not find any trace of Ji Tianqing, the two palace masters were somewhat frustrated and could only give up on the search. The first palace master decisively ordered the fleet to advance at full speed to the east. Anyway, they knew very well that Ji Tianqing's ultimate goal was to pass through the unknown land and enter the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality. It was fine even if they lost track of him temporarily. As long as they crossed the unknown land at the fastest speed, they could continue to search for Ji Tianqing in the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality. At the same time, the god-slaying battleship was traveling through the unknown land, flying through the vast sea of clouds at lightning speed. In the cockpit of the battleship, Bai Long, who was in charge of steering the battleship, stared straight ahead and asked his master behind him. "Master, didn't we shake off the Taiyu Shrine's fleet a long time ago? Why do we have to change our route several times in the process of moving forward?" Ji Tianqing sat cross-legged on the ground with his eyes closed. He was meditating and adjusting his breathing. Hearing this, he calmly explained, "Previously, I didn't know that the first palace master was also personally involved in the pursuit, so I wasn't too cautious. In the end, we managed to shake off the Taiyu Shrine's pursuit, but we were still caught by the Taiyu Shrine's fleet in the unknown land. The first palace master is an ancient god clan from the god realm. He is extremely powerful and has outstanding strategies. He cannot be underestimated. Previously, we were still considered lucky. The two god emperors from the beast clan helped us win a sliver of an opportunity and successfully escaped. If we don't be more careful, the next time the Taiyu Shrine's fleet catches up to us, we will be dead for sure." After listening to his master's explanation, Bai Long finally understood the reason and could not help but sigh. The first Hall Master of the Great Cosmos Shrine is a match for Master. They are evenly matched. Chapter 47-43. After a series of confrontations, Ji Tianqing and White Dragon both realized that the Grand Hallmaster of the Taiyu Shrine was very difficult to deal with. In fact, his strength and intelligence were top-notch among the 4 sacred halls. During the process of the two sides fighting and chasing, Ji Tianqing was constantly speculating about the Taiyu Shrine's movements, and the Grand Hallmaster was also predicting his choices. Even now, he had changed his route several times in the process of escaping, so he should have shaken off the Taiyu Shrine's fleet and was very safe. However, he still couldn't let his guard down. He was still analyzing and speculating about the Grand Hallmaster's next move. Now that we've shaken off the Taiyu Shrine's fleet, with the Grand Hallmaster's wisdom, he must have guessed that my target is the Pantheon of Immortality. Therefore, it's very likely that they'll go all the way east and pass through the unknown land at the fastest speed, entering the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality. When they get there, they'll probably wait at the edge of the unknown land. Otherwise, they'll secretly investigate my whereabouts in the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality. These thoughts flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind as he silently analyzed. He deduced several follow-up scenarios, weighed the pros and cons, and made a decision. White Dragon, change the direction and head south. Suddenly receiving his master's order, White Dragon subconsciously replied, yes. He controlled the array and made the Godslayer battleship fly south. Then he asked, Master, why change the direction? Aren't we going to the Pantheon of Immortality? Ji Tianqing shook his head and explained, "Of course we're going, but not now. The 6 hallmasters of the Taiyu Shrine will come out in full force, even if they have to rush into the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality to catch us." Before Dao Xinyan died, he sent a warning to Lu Jiuyang and Yu Ming. If those 2 guys aren't stupid, they'll definitely join forces with the Pantheon of Immortality to find a way to deal with me. Therefore, now that we have entered the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality, we are walking right into a trap. We are surrounded by enemies. Bai Long immediately understood his master's meaning and continued, "So, we'll turn south and not show ourselves for the time being." When the fleet of the Taiyu Shrine entered the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality, they would definitely not form an alliance or cooperate with each other. It was very likely that a conflict would break out. When both sides are injured, we will go to the Pantheon of Immortality. Only then will we have a chance to turn the tables. Am I right, Shizun? Ji Tianqing nodded slightly. That's right. Anyway, we've already killed Azura and Dao Xinyan. Only Lu Jiuyang and Netherworld are left. Even if you want to take revenge, you don't have to be in a hurry. You can wait a few more years. White Dragon nodded to show that he understood, and then asked, "Master, where are we going? Are we hiding in the south of the unknown lands, or are we going through the unknown lands?" Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and said, "Let's fly south first. When the time comes, we'll decide based on the situation." "Okay." White Dragon replied and focused on controlling the god-slaying battleship. Ji Tianqing also entered the Jiutian 10 Absolutes Tower and returned to the distorted spacetime to cultivate in seclusion. In order to shake off the fleet of the Taiyu Shrine, he had used up a lot of his divine power. In addition, his previous injuries had not healed, and his strength had not recovered. He still needed a long time to recuperate. The unknown lands, which had been peaceful for a long time, became lively and noisy. Following the orders of the 3 lords, countless elite beast race god kings were gathering in large numbers. More and more beast race experts received the news that the fleet of the Taiyu Shrine had launched a large-scale attack. Underworld and Golden Horse Lord were injured by the fleet of the Taiyu Shrine, and Heaven Lord did not gain any benefits. The 3 lords gathered together and were filled with anger. They cursed the Taiyu Shrine countless times. For the time being, they did not know the relationship between the 4 battleships of the Taiyu Shrine. However, after they calmed down, they noticed all kinds of clues. They guessed that the 3 divine battleships of the Taiyu Shrine and the unfamiliar battleship were not on the same side. Otherwise, after the 3 divine battleships injured Underworld and Golden Horse Lord, they would definitely chase after them and kill them completely. Although the 3 beast race lords realized that they had missed some opportunities, they did not regret it. They also did not care what the 4 divine battleships wanted to do. They only knew that the fleet of the Taiyu Shrine entering the unknown lands was not a good thing. They had to gather a large number of troops to intercept and besiege them. Not long after, another leader of the beast race reported to them another piece of news. It was said that another 3 battleships of the Taiyu Shrine had entered the unknown lands and were flying east. The 3 beast race lords were shocked. Their hearts were filled with shock and worry. The Taiyu Shrine had sent out 6 battleships to form 2 fleets and entered the unknown lands one after the other. What did this mean? The 6 temple lords of the Taiyu Shrine had come out in full force. With such a powerful force invading, were they trying to completely conquer the unknown lands? The 3 lords became more and more anxious. They quickly gathered the elite divine kings and rushed to intercept the other 3 battleships. At the same time, the battleships of the 1st Temple Lord, 2nd Temple Lord, and 5th Temple Lord were still shuttling through the unknown lands and flying east firmly and quickly. The first step of their plan was to set up an ambush at the border of the unknown lands and intercept Ji Tianqing's god-slaying battleship. If they really missed it or could not intercept it, they would sneak into the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality and slowly investigate and find out. No one knew that the god-slaying battleship had changed its route and was heading south of the unknown lands. Time passed by quietly. Day after day passed. Soon, 10 days had passed. The 3 battleships led by the First Temple Lord successfully passed through the unknown lands and arrived at the border of the unknown lands. There was an endless stretch of towering mountains and an endless grassland at the border. The towering mountain range with lush forests was the unknown lands. Once they entered the endless grassland, they would enter the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality. The battleships of the First Temple Lord, Second Temple Lord, and Fifth Temple Lord spread out along the border and formed a line of defense that was 1,000,000 miles long. They led the elite divine kings under their command to set up arrays, traps, and ambushes on this line of defense. As long as Ji Tianqing's god-slaying battleship passed by here, it would not be able to escape their detection and would immediately be ambushed and surrounded. On the other side, the battleships of the Third Temple Lord, Fourth Temple Lord, and Sixth Temple Lord also formed a fleet and were still shuttling through the unknown lands. They had already traveled more than half the distance. In another day, they would be able to charge out of the unknown lands and meet up with the First Temple Lord's fleet. But what they did not expect was that the 3 beast lords led tens of thousands of elite beast clan soldiers from different directions and blocked their path. After the 3 god-slaying battleships were surrounded, the 2 sides did not waste any time and immediately started fighting and killing. The 3 Temple Lords had the advantage with their Emperor-level god-slaying battleships and their attacks were very fierce. But the 3 Beast Lords led tens of thousands of Beast Clan god-slaying battleships. They had the advantage of numbers and geography. The 2 sides fought for several hours. Both sides suffered heavy casualties, but they were evenly matched. Chapter 47-44 Xian Kuan, Nether Wilderness, and Golden Horse territorial lords could not defeat the First Hallmaster, Second Hallmaster, and Fifth Hallmaster. However, it was not a problem for them to deal with the Third Hallmaster, Fourth Hallmaster, and Sixth Hallmaster. After all, both sides were at the same level. Furthermore, the 3 lords and tens of thousands of beast race elites had set up an encirclement and ambushed the 3 battleships. The 2 sides fought for 12 hours and traversed more than 3,000,000 miles of the battlefield. Everywhere they passed, everything was turned into ruins. At least 4,000 beast race godly kings were killed. Not even their corpses were left. Even the 3 beast race lords were injured to varying degrees. Their combat strength had decreased. However, the situation of the 3 battleships was not optimistic either. Not only were the 3 battleships damaged, but there were many dents and cracks on their surfaces. Even the interior of the battleships was damaged to varying degrees. The 3 Hallmasters led 3,000 elite godly kings, but more than 1,000 of them had died in this battle. Most of the remaining 1,000 elite godly kings were injured, and their combat strength had decreased. If the battle continued, the 3 lords would be able to gather even more beast race elites, and they would be able to continuously come to their aid. The First Hallmaster, Second Hallmaster, and Fifth Hallmaster were far away at the border of the unknown lands. Even if they came to help, they would need at least a day. In the end, the 3 Hallmasters and the surviving 1,000 elite godly kings would be drowned by the endless beast race army until all of them died in battle. Therefore, halfway through the battle, the 3 Hallmasters gave the order to stop fighting the beast race army and break out of the encirclement with all their might. The second half of the battle was basically the 3 divine battleships fleeing while thousands of beast race elites chased after them. In the end, the 3 battleships paid a terrible price to break out of the encirclement and successfully escaped. The 3 Hallmasters did not escape west and return to the Taiyu Shrine's territory. Instead, they continued east to meet up with the First Hallmaster's fleet. After the battle ended, the 3 beast race lords left behind a portion of the beast race elites to clean up the battlefield. As they circulated their energy to heal themselves, they led the several thousand beast race god kings eastward in pursuit. They wanted to take advantage of the victory and destroy one of the two fleets of the Taiyu Shrine before they met up. This way, it would be much easier for them to deal with the first Hallmaster's fleet. The god-slaying battleship flew south for 10 days. It had already passed through the Golden Horse feudal lord's sphere of influence, but it still hadn't left the unknown land. This surprised the White Dragon. He thought to himself, why is this unknown land so vast? Could it be that there are other beast overlords besides the 3 beast overlords? Although he had seen the map of the Star of Origin before and understood the terrain of the entire continent, he was not familiar with it. However, that was only a rough estimate and not detailed enough. This was especially true for the mysterious and unknown lands that were sandwiched between the 4 shrines. No map could describe them clearly. White Dragon thought that after leaving the Golden Horse Lord's territory, he would be able to leave the unknown land. But he didn't expect that south of the Golden Horse Lord's territory was still a vast primitive jungle and mountain range. He couldn't help but wonder who was the ruler of this unknown land. In addition, if they continued to fly south and crossed this strange and unknown land, where would they arrive? Every star was either round or oval. If one were to advance in a straight line, they would eventually circle around the star and return to their starting point. White Dragon understood this basic knowledge in his previous life without Master's teaching. He had seen it on the map before. The territories of the 4 shrines and many unknown lands were connected to form a circle. And the blank area in the middle of the circle was the mysterious Chaos Sea. The Chaos Sea was north of the shrines, and the map didn't indicate what was south of the 4 shrines. White Dragon couldn't make up his mind, so he could only send a message to Ji Tianqing for instructions. Next, should they stay in this unknown land and recuperate, or continue to explore the south? 10 days had passed in the outside world. Ji Tianqing had been cultivating in seclusion for more than a year in the distorted spacetime of the God Pagoda. His injuries had recovered by 90%, and his strength had also recovered by 70 to 80%. There were no major problems. After another 2 or 3 years of seclusion, he would be able to recover to his peak state. Hearing White Dragon's message, Ji Tianqing ended his cultivation, left the distorted spacetime, and appeared in the battleship's cockpit. Master, we flew south for 10 days, White Dragon bowed to Ji Tianqing. After greeting him, he began to explain the situation. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly to show that he understood. He said, actually, I had already guessed that this would be the case, so I asked you to change your route 10 days ago and fly south. Huh? White Dragon was a little stunned. He asked, Master, do you know what's going on in this area? Ji Tianqing nodded, and a meaningful smile appeared on his face. He said, in the past, the Prajna God Emperor told me that the god of the underworld and the pantheon of immortality had come into contact, and Lu Jiuyang was unwilling to submit to others, so he established his own force in an unknown land and established his own sect. Now that things have come to this, the god of the underworld and the pantheon of immortality might have joined forces a long time ago. Only Lu Jiuyang wouldn't cooperate with any shrines and focus on developing his own force. And this area is very likely the territory he chose. Both master and disciple understood that the reason Lu Jiuyang didn't cooperate with any shrines wasn't because he was arrogant. In terms of arrogance, the god of the underworld was the most confident and arrogant one. The main reason was that the other 4 god emperors had all come into contact with shrines. No matter which shrine Lu Jiuyang came into contact with, he would be a latecomer and wouldn't be valued. Moreover, if 2 god emperors joined a shrine at the same time, it would definitely deepen the conflict between them. Rather than that, Lu Jiuyang might as well establish his own sect. Master, is this really Lu Jiuyang's territory? White Dragon only found it unbelievable. He asked excitedly, if that's the case, then we don't have to rush to the pantheon of immortality. We can find Lu Jiuyang first, kill him, and then leave. Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded. He said, that's right. That's exactly what I'm planning. It won't delay time and won't affect our revenge. White Dragon hurriedly said, Master, then this disciple will do his best to find Lu Jiuyang's location. Ji Tianqing nodded in agreement. Of course, the preliminary investigation would be left to White Dragon to complete. But in the end, he still had to find Lu Jiuyang and take revenge on him himself. The god-slaying battleship continued to fly south. However, they activated the array to conceal their tracks and auras, so as not to alarm the beasts in the forest. Half a day later, when the god-slaying battleship passed by a majestic mountain range, they discovered a cluster of houses and courtyards by the banks of a large river. Hundreds of houses and courtyards were scattered in the forest at an angle to the south of the mountain range, forming a tribe of beasts. Chapter 47-45. Even though the houses and buildings of the beast race tribe looked simple and crude, it was obvious that the style of the houses was influenced by the style of the god realm. In the territories of the Dark Wilderness, Qian Kun, and Golden Horse Lords, the beast race would also build houses and lairs, but it was obviously in the beast race's style. Ji Tianqing and the White Dragon noticed these subtle differences, and they had a plan in their hearts. Swoosh! The god-slaying battleship stopped high in the clouds while Ji Tianqing waited in the cockpit. Bai Long left the battleship and concealed his whereabouts and divine power ripples. He quietly approached the beast race tribe to gather information. Ji Tianqing had already used his divine sense to scan the tribe and found that there were only about 3,000 people in the tribe. Among them, there were a small number of god kings, but there were no god emperors. Most of the beast race members were god lords, and there were even some god realm living beings. A high-level god king like Bai Long would not be discovered by the beast race in the tribe, so his safety would not be a problem. However, Bai Long did not want to make any mistakes and affect his master's revenge plan, so he was extra careful. He carefully snuck into the tribe and hid in the dark to observe the beast race members and eavesdrop on their conversations. He also investigated many houses and mansions, and even flipped through the beast skin scrolls used by the beast race to record words and various divine weapons. 8 hours later, Bai Long finished his investigation and secretly understood the situation of the tribe. He then quietly left and returned to the god-slaying battleship. From beginning to end, he was not discovered by the beast race members, including the tribe chief who was a level 6 god king. Swoosh! There was a flash of white light and Bai Long returned to the cockpit of the god-slaying battleship and appeared in front of Ji Tianqing. He first bowed and greeted him, then began to report the situation. Master, your disciple has already investigated the Beastmen tribe below. There are more than 2,400 people in the tribe. 80% of them are beast race members, and 20% are foreign races. I am not sure which races there are, but I can see that there are at least 7 to 8 races. There were more than 60 God King realm experts in the village, but none of them were upper God Kings. The 2 strongest ones were only middle god kings. However, most of them were still using the beast clan's language and writing, and their living habits were also fixed. But judging from some details, they were still influenced by the Protoss. Most importantly, this disciple heard the word Divine Master mentioned in the beast skin scrolls and the conversation between the 2 beast race god kings. Bai Long told Ji Tianqing all the information and clues he had found in his investigation. After Ji Tianqing heard this, he raised his eyebrows and asked, "Did you find out who the Divine Master is?" Bai Long shook his head and explained, "In order not to alert them, I did not meet with those god kings, nor did I capture them or use soul-searching techniques on them. However, judging from their attitude and tone, the so-called Divine Master should be a person with an extremely high status and was relatively sacred. Based on my intuition, it should be the same as the Temple Masters of the 4 great temples." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and asked, "Then, did you find any other useful information?" White Dragon looked ashamed and shook his head. Ji Tianqing did not say anything else. He let White Dragon steer the battleship and continue flying south. It's right not to alert them. It would be difficult for the beast race members of such a small tribe to know the core information. Let's continue flying south and wait until we encounter a city or a large tribe. White Dragon acknowledged and steered the god-slaying battleship away quietly. In the next half a day, the god-slaying battleship discovered many large and small tribes. These tribes had at most tens of thousands of people, and at least a few thousand people. They were scattered in the vast primitive forest. Just like the small tribe they first discovered, each tribe had the most beast race members. There were also some foreign races mixed in. They all knew how to build houses and courtyards. They also built majestic palaces. All kinds of houses and buildings inherited the rough style of the beast race. However, there were also some traces of the god realm's buildings. Compared to the beast race members scattered in the forest and lived in their nests, these beast race members were considered to have been educated. Finally, the god-slaying battleship encountered a city. It was a majestic city that stood at the peak of a mountain. It had a radius of several dozen kilometers. The main body of the city was built with all kinds of giant stones. It looked very tough and solemn. Not only did this city have 2 city gates, but it also had a huge defensive divine formation. There were also more than 2,000 guards patrolling and defending the city walls. Ji Tianqing had reason to believe that a city of this scale would definitely be an important city in this unknown land. The expert who controlled this city would definitely know more secret information. Thus, Ji Tianqing put away the god-slaying battleship, concealed his tracks and aura, and quietly snuck into the city. No one could discover his presence, even if he walked slowly in the city, walked through the streets and small alleys, and brushed shoulders with countless beast race members. He quietly observed and eavesdropped on the conversations of countless beast race members. He also quietly spread out his divine sense and enveloped the entire city. After a while, he found out that there were over 400,000 people living in this city. 80% of them were beast race members, and there were also many other races living beings. Among the 400,000 people, half of them had the power of God Monarch realm. There were also over 10,000 God King experts. However, in the entire city, the strongest ones were only the 2 ninth degree realm upper-level God Kings. There wasn't even a peak God King, let alone an Emperor God expert. After discovering the residence of the city lord, Ji Tianqing quietly approached and snuck in without making a sound. He didn't alert anyone and didn't attack the city lord. He only secretly flipped through various books and beast skin scrolls to eavesdrop on the city lord's movements. After a few hours, he found the clues that he wanted. From the city lord's mouth, he heard the 2 words Divine Master and understood that the Divine Master was the city lord who ruled this unknown land. More than 10 years ago, this unknown land was scattered and disorderly. It was also a land without an owner. Many beast race leaders ruled by themselves. But ever since the Divine Master came to this area, he used his invincible power and powerful methods to quickly subdue many beast race leaders. Later on, the Divine Master built a divine palace at the Phoenix Ridge in the south and announced that he would occupy and rule this area. Countless beast race tribes and towns either submitted to the Divine Master or were conquered or destroyed. Luckily, the Divine Master had always been benevolent. He ruled this unknown land mainly by subduing. Not only did the Divine Master want to rule the beast race, he also accepted many other races living beings. As long as they were loyal to the Divine Master and had the ability and means, they would be placed in important positions by the Divine Master. The Divine Master would never favor or discriminate against any race. Chapter 47-46. Half a day later, Ji Tianqing left the city. He had already found the information he wanted in the city. He came to this area more than a decade ago, had invincible strength and powerful means, quickly unified this unknown land, and was respectfully called the Divine Master. The direction of this information was very clear. No one could say the name of the Divine Master, or what race he was, or what he looked like. But there were traces of the deities both inside and outside the city, whether it was the architectural style, lifestyle, system, or rules. Ji Tianqing was 90% sure that he could confirm the identity of the Divine Master. So, after he left the city, he let by long drive the deity-slaying battleship all the way south. Phoenix Ridge and the Divine Palace were his targets. Although he still did not know where Phoenix Ridge was and where the Divine Palace was built. But he believed that as long as he continued south, he would definitely find some clues. 2 days had passed. The deity-slaying battleship was still rushing south at full speed. At the same time, the third, fourth, and sixth palace masters finally rushed out of the unknown land and met up with the first palace master and the others at the border. The 6 palace masters of the Taiyu Shrine gathered together and formed a line of defense at the border. From south to north, it stretched for nearly 2 million miles. They set up all kinds of traps and ambushes, as well as many divine formations. It was an inescapable net. As long as Ji Tianqing rushed out of the unknown land, there was a 95% chance that he would run into this line of defense. At that time, the palace masters and thousands of elite divine kings would make it impossible for Ji Tianqing to escape. After setting up the traps and ambushes, the palace masters waited patiently. The third, fourth, and sixth palace masters were injured, so they took the opportunity to recuperate. However, the 6 palace masters waited at the border for an entire day, but they did not see Ji Tianqing appear. The palace masters were a little impatient and were no longer confident. They were all muttering in their hearts. Even if the alien youth was injured and his strength had decreased greatly, he should not be so slow. It had been an entire day. No matter what, the alien youth should have appeared. Why had he not appeared yet? Could it be that the alien youth was hiding in the unknown land and refused to come out? Wasn't he going to cross the unknown land and head to the Pantheon of Immortality? Filled with doubts, the Hall Masters sent messages to seek the first Hall Master's opinion. The first Palace Master was also puzzled. He could not understand what was going on. Logically speaking, that kid's speed can't be faster than ours. We must have reached the border before him. But he still hadn't appeared, so there were only 2 possibilities. Either he changed his direction and route, bypassing our defense line and leaving the unknown lands long ago. Otherwise, it could be that he's not in a hurry to leave the unknown lands and is hiding somewhere to recover his strength. No matter how smart the Grand Palace Master was, he would never have guessed the truth. He would never have thought that Ji Tianqing would fly south. The first Palace Master also had a headache when faced with the questioning of the Palace Masters. He analyzed 2 outcomes, but no matter which one it was very difficult to deal with. Therefore, he could only order the Palace Masters to hold on for another 3 days. If Ji Tianqing still did not show up after 3 days, they would withdraw their defensive line and sneak into the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality. They could only plan their future actions at length. Not long after he gave the order, there was a new situation. The third Palace Master sent a message to report a piece of news to him. Just a while ago, the 3 Beast Clan lords led tens of thousands of elite Beast Clan soldiers and charged out of the unknown lands. Previously, the 3 Palace Masters had fought with the 3 Beast Clan lords in the unknown lands. Now that the 2 sides met again, there was no need for nonsense. They immediately started fighting. The 3 Beast Clan lords came with hatred. They brought tens of thousands of elite Beast Clan lords to seek revenge. They were aggressive and had extremely powerful combat abilities. Even though the third Palace Master had set up traps and ambushes in advance and had the help of a few divine formations, they could not stop the attack of the Beast Clan army. In a short battle, the third Palace Master's soldiers suffered heavy casualties. The defense line was about to be breached. When he heard this news, the first Palace Master was furious. He was so angry that his face turned green. Damn the Beast Clan, they are so stupid. They deserve to die for ruining my plans at such a crucial time. The Taiyu Shrine came out in full force just to capture the foreign race youth who might be the chosen one. The three leaders of the beast race were just bystanders. This matter had nothing to do with them, but they wanted to interfere. Not only did they want to be Ji Tianqing's enemy, they also wanted to oppose the Taiyu temple. The first Hallmaster finally understood that the three beast race overlords were fools. Even now, they still hadn't figured out the relationship between the Cosmos Temple and that alien youth. The three beast clan lords probably thought that they were on the same side. The Taiyu Shrine was very frustrated. However, they could not explain anything. This was too frustrating. Go and reinforce them. I will be there soon. The first palace master did not hesitate to give the order. He asked the second palace master, fourth palace master, and fifth palace master nearby to reinforce them. He also led more than 300 elite beast clan lords to reinforce them on divine ships. This time, he was really angry. He swore to gather all his forces and kill the three beast clan lords first to prevent them from getting in the way. 1,300,000 miles away, at the border of the unknown lands. To the west was a majestic mountain range and a lush forest. To the east was a boundless grassland. At this moment, an intense battle was in progress. The three beast clan lords had all revealed their true forms. They had turned into three giant beasts the size of mountains. They were high in the sky, releasing divine technique flames that covered the sky. More than 10,000 ferocious-looking beast clan lords were in formation in the sky. They released divine technique attacks that rained down like a torrential flood. In the sky above the grassland, 1,000-foot-long divine ship lit up with a dazzling divine light. It constantly released divine light beams. There were also more than 400 elite beast clan lords lined up on both sides of the divine ship. Under the cover of the divine ship, they neutralized the attacks of the beast clan army. The difference in numbers between the two sides was too great. The soldiers under the third palace master could not withstand the attacks of the beast clan army. They were beaten into a disorderly state and suffered heavy casualties. In just a few breaths of time, more than 200 elite beast clan lords had been killed by the beast clan army. As time passed, elite beast clan lords were killed at any time. Not even their corpses were left. The divine ship could only protect the surviving soldiers as they fought and retreated. They tried their best to stall for time. Fortunately, the fifth palace master, who was closest to the third palace master, brought more than 600 elite beast clan lords and rushed over in time to reinforce the third palace master. With the fifth palace master in his divine ship, the pressure on the third palace master was greatly reduced. Originally, he had been surrounded by the three beast clan lords and was severely injured. He was ready to escape at any moment. Since the fifth palace master had come to reinforce him, it meant that the other palace masters would arrive soon. The third palace master felt more at ease. He joined forces with the fifth palace master to deal with the three beast clan lords. They gradually stabilized their footing. Chapter 47-47. Even though the third Hallmaster and fifth Hallmaster were fighting side by side, they were still at a disadvantage. The two warships and hundreds of elite godly kings were still being beaten back. However, they retreated in an orderly manner and were not in a mess. The soldiers did not lose their morale either. After another 100 breaths, another 100 elite godly kings were killed. The two warships also suffered varying degrees of damage. At this moment, the fourth Hallmaster rushed over from afar with a few hundred elite godly kings on his divine warship. He joined the battle without a word. The three Hallmasters joined forces and finally managed to fend off the attacks of the three beast tribe lords. However, the three warships and over 1,000 elite godly kings were still unable to fend off the attacks of the beast tribe army. Hundreds of thousands of divine skill lights clashed violently in the sky, creating a deafening sound that spread for tens of thousands of miles. Violent shockwaves wrapped around billions of godly light fragments and spread outwards like multicolored ripples, circle after circle. Within tens of thousands of miles, the majestic mountains and dense forests, as well as the vast grassland, were all reduced to ruins, leaving behind patches of black scorched earth. The battle was extremely tragic. However, the Beast Tribe army became more and more excited as they fought. Their blood boiled as their killing intent soared. Even though the three Hallmasters joined forces, they could not fend off the attacks of the Beast Tribe army. The soldiers continued to be injured and the three warships continued to retreat towards the grassland. Not long after, the second Hallmaster arrived on his divine warship with over 1,000 elite godly kings. When the second Hallmaster joined the battle and joined forces with the other three Hallmasters to attack the three Beast Tribe Lords, the situation on the battlefield changed. The second Hallmaster was too powerful. Even Ji Tianqing was no match for him, let alone the three Middle God Emperor Realm Beast Tribe Lords. As a result, the situation was reversed. The three Beast Tribe Lords were beaten back and began to retreat into the unknown. The four warships and over 2,000 elite godly kings joined forces to fend off the attacks of the Beast Tribe army. They gradually reached a balance. The Beast Tribe army could no longer advance. The soldiers of the Taiyu Shrine also stabilized their positions and began to counterattack. The situation was not good for the Beast Tribe army. The murderous elite godly kings began to suffer heavy casualties. Now that things had developed to this point, the three lords of Qiankuan, Underworld, and Golden Horse had to consider the consequences. They had long known that the Taiyu Shrine had turned out in full force. They had sent out 6 warships, which meant that all 6 temple masters had come. Now that 3 hall masters had come as reinforcements, there would definitely be 2 more hall masters coming to help. If they did not retreat in time, they would not be able to retreat even if they wanted to when the other 2 hall masters came to reinforce them. Therefore, Yu Huang, Qian Kuan, and Golden Horse Lord discussed for a while and decisively ordered the Beast Clan army to retreat. Boom boom boom. Seeing that the Beast Race army was retreating to an unknown location, the Taiyu Shrine soldiers' confidence was greatly boosted. Their morale was high, and they launched a counterattack and pursuit. With no other choice, the 3 orc lords could only divert their attention to cover for him. Even though the distance between the 2 sides was more than 100,000 li, both sides had suffered a large number of casualties. But in the end, the 3 overlords paid a heavy price and retreated with their armies. The 4 hall masters wanted to take advantage of the victory to pursue and attack, but they saw that more than half of their soldiers had died. The 4 warships were also riddled with holes and needed to be repaired. Most importantly, their goal was to capture the alien youth, not to kill the orc lords. There was no need to sacrifice the lives of their soldiers in this matter. Therefore, the second hall master decisively ordered everyone to stop pursuing. The battle was over. Only scorched earth and ruins with a radius of more than 100,000 li were left. The ground was littered with broken weapons, armor, and corpses, as well as billowing smoke and dust. The second hall master ordered some of the soldiers to stay and clean up the battlefield. The rest returned to their respective areas and continued to preside over the defense line. At this moment, the first hall master's warship arrived. Seeing the situation on the battlefield, the first hall master did not need to ask to know the outcome. Although he was still angry and wanted to ask the second hall master why he did not pursue into the unknown and kill the 3 orc lords, the first hall master's men were all killed. However, he saw that half of the soldiers under the command of the 4 palace masters had already died. The soldiers who were lucky enough to survive were also injured. Therefore, the first hall master dispelled that thought. He sent a telepathic message to the other hall masters and left on his warship. The 3 lords of Qian Kuan, Underworld, and Golden Horse led the remaining 6,000 orc elites and fled 1,000,000 li away, hiding in the unknown. They had thought that the other party would pursue and kill them, but they did not expect the other party to stay at the border of the unknown. While the three lords heaved a sigh of relief, they also felt that the situation was a little strange. Therefore, they ordered the orc elites under their command to stay where they were and quickly treat their injuries and recover their divine power. At the same time, they gathered together to discuss the Taiyu Shrine's purpose. Previously, we thought that the Taiyu Shrine had turned out in full force to kill us and take over our territory. But now, it seems that this is not the case. They turned out in full force, crossed the unknown, and set up traps and ambushes at the border. What are they trying to do? Could it be that the Taiyu Shrine wants to declare war on the Pantheon of Immortality? After all, past that border is the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality. That can't be. The shrines have been at peace for tens of thousands of years. There are no direct conflicts of interest or territorial disputes between the two sides. Why would they suddenly declare war? I have a bold guess. You can see if it makes sense. Do you still remember the divine worship from before? The one we were chasing. I suspect that the divine worship has nothing to do with the Taiyu Shrine. Even the 6 lords of the Taiyu Shrine came to hunt down that divine worship. That's impossible, right? That divine worship looks ordinary and there's nothing special about it. How could it make the Taiyu Shrine turn out in full force? Regardless of whether you believe it or not, I think it makes sense. Otherwise, the 6 lords of the Taiyu Shrine would not set up traps and ambushes at the border. Yes. If the Taiyu Shrine wanted to deal with us, they had several opportunities to do so. For example, just now, they only needed to chase with all their might to make it impossible for us to escape. There's only one explanation. Their target is not us, nor is it the Pantheon of Immortality. It's that mysterious worship. Since the Taiyu Shrine is chasing after that divine worship at all costs, they must have their reasons. If we can find that worship, we can solve this mystery. Where did that worship escape to? It should have left the unknown long ago, right? The 3 lords discussed in secret for a while, but they did not come up with any useful plans. Thus, they temporarily stopped arguing about this matter and reached a consensus after some discussion. That was, to hide at the border and heal, gather more beasts, and secretly monitor the 6 temple masters of the Cosmos Temple to see what would happen. Chapter 47-48. The border area of the unknown land was in a stalemate. The 3 orc lords and thousands of orc soldiers were recuperating while monitoring the movements of the Taiyu Shrine. The 6 temple masters of the Taiyu Shrine were still in a defensive line at the border area, waiting for an opportunity. However, after waiting for another day, they still did not see Ji Tianqing appear. Therefore, the 6 temple masters prepared to withdraw their defensive line and leave the border area. Next, they would enter the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality to search for Ji Tianqing. However, at this moment, something unexpected happened. A majestic fleet surrounded by divine light flew out from the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality and headed straight for the temple masters of the Taiyu Shrine. There were 5 godly warships in the fleet that covered the sky. They were ferocious and filled with murderous intent. In a short while, the fleet flew to the end of the horizon and stopped 10,000 miles away from the Taiyu Shrine fleet. The 3rd temple master, the 4th temple master, and the 6th temple master had just gathered. They looked at the fleet 10,000 miles away and frowned. Why would there be a fleet at this time? That fleet came from the Pantheon of Immortality. It should be them. I saw it. There are 4 godly warships with the insignia of the Pantheon of Immortality on them. It's them. Damn it. We were just about to sneak into the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality when they arrived at this time. Report this to the 1st temple master and ask him to make a decision. The Taiyu Shrine and the Pantheon of Immortality were the closest to each other. There was only an unknown land between the 2 godly warships. In the past tens of thousands of years, the temple masters of the two temples had interacted many times. They were not strangers to each other. The three temple masters could not only recognize that fleet as the flagship of the pantheon of immortality, but they could also tell which temple masters were on it. They were very alert and ordered the warships to assume a defensive posture. All the soldiers were also prepared for battle. At the same time, the third palace master quickly sent a message to the first palace master to report the news. On the other side, in the fleet of the pantheon of immortality, the temple masters on the 5 divine warships were also frowning with complicated expressions. I've long guessed that the Taiyu Shrine would send a few shrine masters here to hunt down that Kenshin. I didn't expect to run into them here. We're still a little late. Judging from their posture, they've already set up an ambush at the border. They set up a defensive line at the border. Are they waiting for the Kenshin to walk right into their trap? Does that mean Kenshin is still in the unknown lands? That's very likely. Quickly report this news to the first hall master. Let's ask the 6th palace master and see what he has to say. He was the one who provided the information, and the first palace master made the plan after analyzing and speculating. Of the 5 divine warships, 4 of them had the insignia of the pantheon of immortality. There was no doubt that the owners of these 4 warships were the temple masters of the pantheon of immortality, from the 2nd palace master to the 5th palace master. The black warship without the insignia of the pantheon of immortality exuded a gloomy chill. It was the warship of the new 6th palace master. This 6th palace master was a member of the Flood tribe. His background were unknown, and his nickname was Nether. He had come to the territory of the pantheon of immortality more than a decade ago and had met the pantheon of immortality many times. He had even fought with 2 temple masters. In the past few years, the temple masters of the pantheon of immortality had all thought that the god of the underworld might be the one chosen by heaven that they were looking for. Therefore, the pantheon of immortality had repeatedly asked the god of the underworld to join the temple and be conferred the title of 6th palace master. But the god of the underworld's attitude had always been vague, as if he was waiting for the best offer. After many negotiations, the 2 sides had not reached a consensus. But just a few months ago, the god of the underworld had received some news or been provoked by something, and he had taken the initiative to meet with the first palace master and had a secret conversation with him for an entire night. Later, the temple masters found out that the god of the underworld had come from the realm of gods, and that there were 4 god emperor powerhouses who had come to the planet of origin with him. However, the 4 god emperor powerhouses were scattered in different areas and had met with the other temples. The god of the underworld had openly admitted that he was not the one chosen by heaven, but a talented god emperor who had only cultivated for a short period of time. Among the 4 god emperor from the realm of gods, there was a god emperor called Kenshin who had a grudge against them. In the past 10 years, Kenshin had used various schemes to kill 3 of the god of the underworld's companions. Now, Kenshin had just caused havoc in the Taiyu Shrine, and would definitely pass through the unknown lands and enter the territory of the pantheon of immortality. Kenshin's next step was to mess with the pantheon of immortality and find an opportunity to assassinate him. The god of the underworld had received the news in advance, and decided to cooperate with the pantheon of immortality to deal with Kenshin. When they first heard this news, the pantheon of immortality's temple masters had mixed feelings. In their opinion, since the god of the underworld was not the one chosen by heaven, then they did not have to accept the god of the underworld, and there was no need to promise him the position of 6th temple master. On the other hand, the foreign god emperor called Kenshin was brave and resourceful, and his performance was astonishing. If possible, the pantheon of immortality could absorb him and increase their power. It was so much so that the 2nd palace master and the 3rd palace master had even analyzed whether or not the so-called heaven's chosen one was the sword god. However, the god of the underworld's explanation dispelled their guesses and concerns. First of all, they could confirm that Kenshin had never been to the planet of origin, and knew nothing about the Chaos Sea, so he was definitely not the one chosen by heaven. If he was the one chosen by heaven, he must have a certain connection with the gate of heavenly path in the depths of the Chaos Sea, and could ignite the eternal flame. But as far as they knew, Kenshin had followed the army of the Shang-Qin temple to the depths of the Chaos Sea with the Shura God Emperor, and had seen the gate of heavenly path. Since the gate of heavenly path did not react, and the eternal flame was not ignited, it meant that Kenshin was not the one chosen by heaven. The god of the underworld's tone and attitude were very certain. After the temple masters of the Pantheon of Immortality learned of this news, they dispelled their guesses and thoughts. Following that, the god of the underworld told the temple masters that Kenshin was very ruthless. A few months ago, Kenshin had slaughtered millions of innocent desolate race citizens in order to deal with the Nebula God Emperor in the Taiyu Shrine's territory. Following that, when Kenshin entered the Pantheon of Immortality's territory, he would use the same method to deal with him. If they did not send strong people to kill Kenshin early, millions of desolate race citizens would suffer. Other than that, the god of the underworld also said many things to discredit Kenshin, and to instigate a conflict between the Pantheon of Immortality and the Taiyu Shrine. The temple masters of the Pantheon of Immortality gradually believed the god of the underworld's words. Hence, the Grand Temple Master gave the order to send for temple masters and the god of the underworld to lead 5,000 elite godly monarchs to the border between the temple and the unknown. Their primary goal was to kill Kenshin, and then to stop the temple masters of the Taiyu Shrine. Chapter 47-49. Inside the pitch-black, eerie divine battleship. A tall man dressed in a black robe and a cloak stood in the divine battleship's cockpit. This mysterious and cold man was the god of the underworld. Although he was already the sixth hall master of the Pantheon of Immortality, he did not have many desolate race god kings under his command. The battleship he was piloting was personally refined by him. The thousands of elite soldiers on the battleship were also brought by him from the heavenly realm. Although the Pantheon of Immortality only gave him the title of Sixth Hall Master and did not give him the corresponding treatment, he did not care. He did not complain, nor did he care. This was because he knew that this was the first time he and the Pantheon of Immortality had worked together. Or, it could be said that he was using the Pantheon of Immortality. Even if he was confident that he could deal with Kenshin alone and not be assassinated by Kenshin like the other god emperors, he would not do anything without confidence. However, he would never do anything that he was not confident in. He would still use the immortal temple to help him achieve his goal. However, the development of the situation was a little different from what he had expected. How could this be? Even if Dao Xingyun was the sixth hall master of the Taiyu Shrine, the Taiyu Shrine would definitely take revenge for Kenshin's killing of Dao Xingyun to save the shrine's reputation. But, isn't there too many people? Why did they send so many hall masters? The god of the underworld was not a reckless person. He could even be called a hero. His wisdom and strategy were definitely not inferior to Ji Tianqing and the Taiyu Shrine's first hall master. Hence, when he saw the Taiyu Shrine's 3 battleships, he guessed that the Taiyu Shrine would definitely send more than 3 hall masters. He muttered in his heart and could not help but guess, is the Taiyu Shrine so persistent in hunting down Kenshin just to avenge Dao Xingyun? It shouldn't be. Dao Xingyun was important, but it wouldn't cost the Taiyu Shrine so much. I'm afraid that the Taiyu Shrine has seen some clues and guessed that Kenshin is the chosen one. That's why they're so determined to get him. Although the god of the underworld had deceived the hall masters of the Pantheon of Immortality and made them believe that Kenshin was not the chosen one. But he knew very well that none of the 5 god emperors could be the chosen one. Only Kenshin could be. But now that things had developed to this point, he could only hide and cover it up. He could not let the hall masters of the Pantheon of Immortality find out. Swish swish. At this moment, he received a message from the 2 palace masters. The 2 hall masters of the Pantheon of Immortality asked him what he thought of the current situation and what he should do next. Therefore, the god of the underworld thought for a moment and sent a message back to the two hall masters. The new hall master of the Taiyu shrine was killed by Kenshin. For the sake of their reputation and dignity, the Taiyu shrine will of course do everything they can to kill Kenshin. But now it seems that the truth of the matter is more than that. The Taiyu shrine is obviously using this as an excuse to invade our territory under the pretext of killing Kenshin. Otherwise, they wouldn't have crossed the unknown land and entered our territory, and they wouldn't have sent so many hall masters. The god of the underworld's reply was not long, but it was very firm. After the two hall masters received the message, they believed him. They were also very angry about the Taiyu shrine's actions. Then, the four hall masters discussed telepathically and came to a consensus with the underworld temple. They decided to attack first before the Taiyu shrine could react and force the Taiyu shrine's fleet back to the unknown land. This was the only way to prevent the enemy from invading the Pantheon of Immortality's territory. In short, the god of the underworld's attitude and determination was to defend the Pantheon of Immortality's territory. Boom! 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 After a while, the four hall masters and the underworld temple's flagship released divine light pillars that covered the sky at the same time and attacked the Taiyu shrine's fleet. The three hall masters were shocked. They were anxious and worried, and they found it hard to believe. They knew the Pantheon of Immortality's hall masters. They were not reckless people. But now, the Pantheon of Immortality's fleet attacked so recklessly and did not even give them a chance to negotiate. At this point, the three hall masters felt helpless. They could only activate the defensive array and counterattack. Bang! 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 The divine powers used by the two sides collided in the sky and made deafening noises. All kinds of divine light pillars and dazzling divine arts collided fiercely in the sky, exploding into billions of pieces that scattered between heaven and earth. In the first round of the battle, the Taiyu shrine's fleet was obviously at a disadvantage. Not only was the defensive light shield of the battleship shattered, but the battleship was also damaged. There were many new dents and cracks on the surface of the battleship. The Pantheon of Immortality had gained the upper hand, so their morale was greatly boosted. The soldiers attacked even more bravely and wanted to completely destroy the Taiyu shrine's fleet. But the three hall masters of the Taiyu shrine were not stupid. They knew that they were weaker than the enemy, so they could not fight head-on. So, they chose to retreat strategically and retreated in the direction of the reinforcements. The soldiers of the Pantheon of Immortality did not notice anything wrong and chased after them excitedly. The god of the underworld guessed that the enemy must have reinforcements and it would be dangerous if they continued to chase after them. But he would not warn them. He would rather deepen the conflict between the two sides and not care about Kenshin's identity and movements. Just like that, the Pantheon of Immortality's fleet chased after them and continuously released destructive divine powers to attack the Taiyu shrine's fleet. The three battleships of the Taiyu shrine were humiliated and tortured. They fought and retreated, and the soldiers were frustrated. Finally, the two sides moved the battlefield 400,000 miles away. The three warships of the Taiyu temple were riddled with cracks and craters from the bombardment. Even the soldiers on the battleship started to suffer casualties. At this moment, the reinforcements of the Taiyu shrine arrived. The second hall master and the fifth hall master were the first to arrive. The two divine warships could see the situation on the battlefield clearly even from a distance. So, after the two divine warships arrived on the battlefield, they immediately attacked the 5 battleships of the Pantheon of Immortality. The situation on the battlefield immediately became even. Both sides had 5 Emperor God experts and 5 battleships attacking each other. They were evenly matched and neither side had the upper hand. The 4 hall masters of the Pantheon of Immortality were shocked and in disbelief. They did not expect that the Taiyu shrine would send out 5 hall masters. They were so powerful. The god of the underworld stepped forward at the critical moment and sent a message to the 4 hall masters, asking them to retreat first while he stayed behind to cover the rear. Naturally, the 4 hall masters were very grateful for this and trusted the god of the underworld even more. But they could not do that. They would rather have the 5 battleships attack together and retreat together. So, the 2 sides continued to fight and kill each other. Only the Pantheon of Immortality showed signs of retreating. After 15 minutes, the first hall master of the Taiyu Shrine arrived again. When the first hall master's battleship joined the battle, the situation on the battlefield was completely reversed. Chapter 4750. The first hall master was the strongest, and his warship was the most powerful. The Pantheon of Immortality was forced to retreat. They had no choice but to return to their territory as quickly as possible. At the same time, the other hallmasters quickly sent messages to the first hallmaster. The first hallmaster was shocked and angry when he learned that the Taiyu Shrine's fleet had invaded and that the hallmasters had come out in full force. Now that things had developed to this point, the 2 sides were like fire and water. No matter what the Taiyu Shrine's reason was, sending the hallmasters to invade the Pantheon of Immortality's territory was tantamount to declaring war on the Pantheon of Immortality. This was definitely not a misunderstanding or a provocation. It was an invasion and war. The Pantheon of Immortality had been established for tens of thousands of years and had weathered many storms. It was still standing on the continent. How could it be defeated so easily? Even though the Taiyu Shrine was strong, the Pantheon of Immortality was not afraid. The first hallmaster was furious. He immediately issued several orders to declare war on the Taiyu Shrine. He first ordered the second hallmaster, third hallmaster, and the others to retreat to their territory and rest. They were not to fight the Taiyu Shrine's fleet head-on. They were to preserve their strength. Then, he issued orders to more than 80 hallmasters to gather a large number of elite god kings. He gave a 1-month deadline and ordered the 80 hallmasters to gather an army of 100,000 god kings and gather at the western border of his territory. After issuing these orders, the first hallmaster gathered 5,000 god guards and personally drove the warship to the western border at the fastest speed possible. Since the Taiyu Shrine's first hallmaster had personally taken action, as the founder of the Pantheon of Immortality, he naturally had to take action as well. It's been 60,000 years. Taiyu God Emperor, the last time I fought you was 60,000 years ago. This time, I'd like to see how far your strength has progressed. How dare you be so arrogant? In the speeding warship, the God Emperor's face was gloomy. He stared ahead with sharp eyes and muttered to himself. At the western border of the Pantheon of Immortality's territory, at the border of the unknown land. The 4 hallmasters and the god of the underworld were high up in the sky. They were fighting with the Taiyu Shrine's hallmasters and covering the retreat of their fleets. They had the upper hand and the 3 hallmasters of the Taiyu Shrine were beaten to a pulp. However, when the other 2 hallmasters of the Cosmos Sacred Hall arrived, the battle became a draw. Later on, the Grand Hall Master of the Cosmos Temple arrived, and the situation was completely reversed. The 4 Temple Masters of the Immortal Temple and the Netherworld Divine Emperor were no match for their opponents and could only retreat as they fought. The Hall Master of Immortal Immortality by God. Of Hall Master of Immortal Immortality. Of Hall Master of Immortality of Immortality. The Hallmaster of Imto of Immortalities of Hallmaster of Immortality to be killed to us. Although both sides had suffered casualties, and the number of casualties was not small. Overall, the Pantheon of Immortality suffered more casualties. Not only were the 5 battleships heavily damaged, but even the 4 Hallmasters and the Netherworld Divine Emperor were also heavily injured and in a sorry state. More than half of the elite soldiers under their command were killed or injured. The more desperate the situation was, the more determined they were to escape. This was the order of the immortal God Emperor. He wanted them to conserve their strength as much as possible. If the Temple of Immortality lost 2 temple masters and thousands of elite god kings in this unprepared battle, the Temple of Immortality would be doomed. Then, even if the immortal god emperor personally came to join the battle, he would be powerless. Therefore, the 4 Hallmasters and the god of the underworld were running for their lives. Fortunately, they retreated in time and were determined enough. At the critical moment, they were also determined to cut their losses. They decisively abandoned more than 1,000 soldiers. In the end, the 1,000 or so elite god kings were obliterated by the Cosmos Temple's fleet. Their bones were ground to dust. Their deaths also bought time for the 4 Hallmasters and the god of the underworld, allowing the fleet to escape. The distance between the two sides increased to more than 300,000 miles. If the Taiyu Shrine continued to pursue, the Hallmaster's divine sense would be able to detect the other side and would not be shaken off. However, the Hallmaster chose to stop the pursuit and did not continue to enter the Pantheon of Immortality's territory. This decision puzzled the other Hallmasters. They all sent voice transmissions to ask the first Hallmaster why he was not continuing the chase. The Hallmaster explained to them, "Don't chase a cornered enemy. After all, this is the Pantheon of Immortality's territory. If we continue to pursue, we will soon encounter traps and ambushes. In addition, we have 3 beast lords and tens of thousands of soldiers behind us. If they interfere, we will be in a very passive situation. Most importantly, our goal is to capture the God Emperor, not to attack the Pantheon of Immortality. If we continue to pursue them, we will lose 800 of our own to kill 1,000 of our enemies. That will be the final outcome." After hearing the Hallmaster's words, the other Hallmasters all expressed their understanding. Afterward, the first Hallmaster left with the fleet. He found a lofty mountain range nearby and hid there to rest and recuperate. They would need to recuperate for 4 or 5 days before they could continue to move. When the time came, they would hide their tracks and auras and sneak into the Pantheon of Immortality's territory to search for Ji Tianqing. At the border of the unknown lands, Qiankuan, Underworld, and Golden Horse Lords were discussing. Although the Beast Race army was hiding in the mountains to recuperate and hadn't made any moves for the time being. However, they had been monitoring the Taiyu Shrine's fleet, so they naturally saw the battle between the Taiyu Shrine and the Pantheon of Immortality. At that time, the 11 god monarchs and the 11 battleships from both sides were fighting fiercely in the sky. They fought until divine light splashed and flowers fell from the sky. The 3 beast lords felt their blood boil as they watched, their emotions stirring. Of course, they would not join in the fun, much less participate in the battle. They only hoped that the Hallmasters of the 2 god temples would fight even more fiercely and savagely. It would be best if both sides suffered heavy losses, with all the soldiers on both sides killed and a few Hallmasters killed. That would be perfect. They would only have the opportunity to rise again after the 2 great temples had suffered great losses. For tens of thousands of years, they had been sandwiched between the 2 god temples, carefully surviving. As long as those 2 mountains did not fall, they would never be able to rise again. The 3 lords thought that the 2 god temples' fleets would be evenly matched and could fight for a long time. However, they did not expect that after 2 hours of fighting, the Pantheon of Immortality's fleet would be defeated and flee pathetically. Seeing the Taiyu Shrine's fleet give chase, the 3 lords were still very excited and full of anticipation. However, the Taiyu Shrine's fleet only chased for a few million miles before stopping to find a place to rest. This disappointed the 3 lords, and they were filled with regret. What a pity! They fought for so long, but none of the Hallmasters were killed. Although the battle was fierce, those who died were all god kings. Those Hallmasters are fine. After all, they are God Emperor. How can they be killed so easily? They stopped fighting. What should we do? Chapter 47-51. Originally, the 3 orc lords wanted to watch the snipe and the clam fight and reap the benefits. However, the outcome did not go as they wished. They were very disappointed and had to discuss their next plan. Underworld and Golden Horse Lord suggested that they lead an army of 10,000 orcs to infiltrate the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality and secretly monitor the movements of the two temples. In the future, the fleets of the two temples would fight again. They could find a suitable opportunity to strike and reap greater benefits. However, this suggestion was rejected by Heaven and Earth Lord. He felt that the motive of the Taiyu Shrine was not pure. It did not seem like they were attacking the Pantheon of Immortality but more like they were looking for someone. Speaking of looking for someone, the three lords thought of Ji Tianqing in his Godslayer battleship. Heaven and Earth Lord believed that the Taiyu Shrine would not make a big fuss in order to find someone. They would definitely act secretly. Therefore, the fleet of the Taiyu Shrine would not engage in a large-scale battle with the fleet of the Pantheon of Immortality. If they took a huge risk and led an army of 10,000 orcs to invade the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality, the consequences would be too severe. The temple masters of the Pantheon of Immortality would definitely annihilate them at all costs. They did not have a battleship and would definitely not be able to defeat the fleet of the Pantheon of Immortality. They would also not be able to escape when they were chased. In the unknown lands, they would still have the geographical advantage and could contend with the fleets of the two temples. However, if they entered the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality, they would only be passively beaten. Rather than walking into a trap, it would be better to stay at the border of the unknown lands and wait for the rabbit to come out. After listening to Heaven and Earth Lord's analysis, Golden Horse Lord and Underworld Lord nodded in agreement. However, they also suggested that they send a group of spies to infiltrate the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality and be responsible for gathering information. This was very necessary. If they did not have spies to gather information, they would not be able to stay at the border of the unknown lands and observe the changes. On the other side, in the south of the unknown lands, the god-slaying battleship flew south for a few days and encountered another city. It was probably because this place was close to the Phoenix Ridge and was located in the center of the region, so the population was higher and the city was more prosperous. This city, with a radius of 100 miles, was located on a fertile grassland. It was built in a rather majestic manner. Not only were there thousands of guards guarding the city, but there was also a powerful divine array. There were more than 1 million citizens living in the city. Most of them were from the beast race. There were also some members of the desolate race and strange alien races. There were many god kings in this city, but there was still no god emperor realm expert. From the architectural style of the city, one could see that it was more influenced by the Protoss. Ji Tianqing retrieved the god-slaying battleship and concealed his presence. He descended from the sky and snuck into the city. He walked around the city a few times and stayed for half a day. After that, he hid in the city lord's mansion and eavesdropped on the conversation between the city lord and a few powerhouses. He even snuck into the library to read some books. Through this series of actions, he finally grasped the information he wanted. That's right, this city was very close to the Phoenix Ridge. The Phoenix Ridge was south of this city, about 20 million miles away. It was a forbidden area, and unrelated people were not allowed to approach. On the peak of the Phoenix Ridge, there was a majestic divine palace called the Nine-Yang Divine Palace. It was a sacred ground, a place where billions of citizens believed and worshipped. The powerhouses who lived in that divine palace were the rulers of this region and the protectors of billions of citizens. Although the owner of the Nine-Yang Divine Palace was a powerhouse from a different race, and the tens of thousands of divine guards under him were also from different races. However, all the living beings in this region knew that the Nine-Yang God Emperor never ostracized or belittled other races. As long as they were loyal to him, regardless of race, they would be treated well. It was because of this that for more than a decade, all the large and small factions in this region had successively submitted to the Nine-Yang God Emperor. After learning this information, Ji Tianqing left the city in satisfaction. He continued steering the god-slaying battleship and flying south. 4 hours later, the god-slaying battleship arrived near the Phoenix Ridge. It was indeed a mountain range with abundant divine power and rich resources. It was no wonder that the 9 young god emperor had chosen to build his divine palace here. Within a radius of 10 million miles, there were endless majestic mountain ranges and primeval forests. Among the mountain ranges that undulated like giant dragons, there were peaks that towered tens of thousands of feet high, reaching into the sea of clouds. Many formations had been set up in the mountains, and they operated day and night, absorbing divine power from all directions. The closer he got to the Phoenix Ridge, the denser the divine power in the surroundings. Even the clouds that covered the sky had become 5-colored. In order to not alert the 9 young god emperor, Ji Tianqing put away the god-slaying battleship and passed through the sea of clouds alone, approaching the Phoenix Ridge. On the way to the Phoenix Ridge, Ji Tianqing discovered many divine arrays among the mountains. Most of the divine arrays were used to absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, but some of them were traps, ambushes, or warnings. If an uninformed person barged in, even if they were a high-level god king, they would die without a burial place. Even if peak divine kings came and were trapped by those traps and array formations, they would also end up with a fate of being covered in cuts and bruises. It was obvious that the 9 young god emperor loved his people and welcomed all living beings under his command. But in reality, he did not trust them at all, and was even on guard against the foreign races. The people he trusted the most were the soldiers he had brought from the divine world, who had always been loyal to him. 2 hours passed. Ji Tianqing crossed hundreds of mountain ranges and dozens of peaks before finally arriving at the Phoenix Ridge. It was an extremely majestic mountain range that stretched for millions of miles. It had a majestic aura. Looking down from the sky, the entire mountain range looked like a soaring phoenix. It was very shocking. At the peak of the mountain range, on the back of the phoenix, there was a dazzling palace and courtyard. The divine palace in the middle was the most majestic and dignified. Its appearance was also the most sacred and gorgeous. It was as golden as the sun. Without a doubt, that dazzling palace was the 9 young divine palace. The defenses around the divine palace were loose on the outside and tight on the inside. On the surface, it looked like there was no defense, but in reality, not only were there a large number of guards, there were also many defensive arrays. Especially in many key places, there were many high-level god kings lying in ambush. They were all god tribes loyal to Lu Jiuyang. Ji Tianqing circled around the 9 young divine palace twice. After carefully observing the situation, he was sure that this was Lu Jiuyang's territory. Lu Jiuyang was very cautious, and the divine palace's defenses were very strong. But Ji Tianqing believed that he would soon be able to infiltrate the 9 young divine palace and find Lu Jiuyang. With his current strength, killing Lu Jiuyang would be as easy as killing Dao Xingyun and the Azura God Emperor. Thus, he secretly used the Divine Eye secret technique to observe the 9 young divine palace's defenses. He looked for a weak point and began to break the defensive arrays. Chapter 47-52. The 9 young divine palace's defensive grand array was also traceable. The outer defensive array was basically a supreme-grade king-level divine array. There were either 6 or 9 stacked divine arrays. The deeper inside, the closer it was to the 9 young divine palace, the higher the grade of the divine array and the stronger its power. As for the array protecting the 9 young divine palace alone, it was a 2-layer emperor-level divine array. That was the barrier that Ji Tianqing was most worried about. The king-level divine arrays on the outer layer were not difficult for him. After all, they were all king-level arrays, and they came from the realm of the gods. He was very familiar with them. Taking advantage of the dark and windy night, he calculated the gaps between the patrolling guards and began to cast his spell. He had already observed the outermost defensive formation and studied it thoroughly. Once he started, he would use his fastest speed to peel the cocoon off the defensive array. In just 20 breaths, he successfully broke open a gap. After that, Ji Tianqing, who was invisible and hiding his aura, turned into a speck of dust. With a whoosh, he passed through the gap and entered the defensive array. The gap in the array quickly healed and was as good as new. There were no signs that it had been broken open. After a few dozen breaths, a group of patrolling guards passed by and did not notice anything unusual. At this time, Ji Tianqing had already arrived near the second defensive array. He hid in the bamboo forest at the corner of the garden. He secretly used the God's Eye secret technique and stared at the second defensive array for a long time. Then, he took advantage of the gaps between the patrolling guards to decisively break the array. Although this layer of barrier was formed by 6 king-level divine arrays and had not reached the emperor level, it was extremely complicated and cumbersome. However, Ji Tianqing only used less than 30 breaths to break open this layer of barrier. Whoosh! Without making a sound, he passed through the gap in the formation and went back inside. Next, Ji Tianqing repeated the same trick and used the same method to break 3 layers of barrier consecutively in a few hours. Although each layer of barrier was formed by several divine arrays and had very strong defensive power, it was also very tedious and complicated to break open. However, Ji Tianqing could easily see through them and cast a spell to break them in a very short time. After breaking through several layers of barriers, he was not discovered by the patrolling guards. In the end, he arrived at the 9-yang divine palace, near the 2 innermost emperor-grade divine arrays. Not only were they the most complicated, and difficult of the 2 formations, they were also the 9-yang god emperor's last resort. As long as these 2 divine arrays were still operating normally, the 9-yang god emperor would be safe. No one would be able to threaten him. Of course, over the past decade, no one had been able to break through these 2 divine formations, and no one had been able to threaten his safety. As a result, the 9-yang god emperor let down his guard, and the patrolling guards were no longer as cautious and vigilant as before. Ji Tianqing silently observed the first emperor-level defensive formation, trying to understand its structure and profundity. 2 hours later, he had observed and understood everything clearly. While the guards were patrolling, he decisively cast a spell and began to crack the formation. In the end, everything went very smoothly. In just a short 2 hours, he had broken through the first layer of the defensive formation. During these 2 hours, the patrolling guards had passed by several times. However, he had concealed his whereabouts and aura so that he was not discovered by the patrolling guards. After breaking through the defensive formation, he tore a crack in the formation, turned himself into a speck of dust, and casually entered. There were no ripples of divine power, nor was there any sound or movement. Just like that, he had silently entered the 9-yang divine palace. Next, the only thing that stood between him and the 9-yang god emperor was the last emperor-level defensive formation. At this time, he could even sense Lu Jiuyang's divine power aura, as well as the auras of many god kings within the divine palace. Even though he was a little excited, he restrained himself and waited patiently. He began to observe the second divine formation. There was no suspense. The second formation was even more intricate and complex than the first, and it was also more powerful. It could not be helped. This was the final barrier of the 9-yang divine palace, and it had been personally set up by the 9-yang god emperor. The 9-yang god emperor had always believed that apart from himself and the holders of his tokens, no one could enter or leave this formation. But now, Ji Tianqing had used 4 hours of silent observation and research to finally find a way to break the formation. Thus, while concealing his whereabouts and aura, he began to break through the formation. In the process of breaking the array, there were guards constantly patrolling back and forth, and some even passed by him. In addition, the 9-yang god emperor was also in the divine palace, accompanied by a large number of higher god kings. If Ji Tianqing leaked the slightest bit of divine power aura or fluctuation while breaking through the formation, he would be discovered by everyone. At that time, not only would he fail at the last step, but he would also be discovered and besieged by everyone. Therefore, when Ji Tianqing was trying to break the formation, he was extremely careful. Of course, he also spent a lot of time. It took him a full 8 hours to break open a chopstick-sized crack in the formation. Whoosh! After the formation was broken, Ji Tianqing did not hesitate at all. He directly passed through the crack and entered the formation. From this moment on, he had truly entered the Nine-Yang Divine Palace. All the halls and rooms in the Divine Palace were no longer guarded against him. Even if there were 2 to 6 God Kings guarding every intersection, every door, and every room, it was useless to him. He calmed his divine power slightly and stepped into the Nine-Yang Divine Palace with a calm heart. Lu Jiuyang, I'm here. Are you ready? When he entered the Nine-Yang Divine Palace, this was the only thought in Ji Tianqing's mind. He had already awakened the Hanya God Emperor and had her be on standby at any time, ready to support him. After all, no matter how confident he was, he would not be arrogant to the point of being arrogant. He knew very well that before Dao Xingyun died, he had sent a message to the Nine-Yang God Emperor and the God of the Underworld. Therefore, Lu Jiuyang was definitely on guard. Rustle, 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 silently, Ji Tianqing passed through 2 corridors and a courtyard. Even when he passed in front of those God King realm guards, none of them noticed anything unusual. He saw that those guards were expressionless, and their minds were in a daze. He also heard the sound of footsteps, coughs, and whispers coming from all over the Divine Palace. He also sensed that there were many God Kings lying in ambush in the surrounding darkness, hiding invisible killing intent. But most importantly, he sensed a wisp of the God Emperor's aura hidden in the study. Without any hesitation, Ji Tianqing went straight to the study based on his intuition. In a short while, he crossed 2 courtyards and entered the depths of the Nine-Yang Divine Palace, arriving outside the solemn and dignified study. There were 8 God Kings guarding the entrance of the study, all of them wearing armor and carrying divine weapons. They were very vigilant and alert. However, Ji Tianqing did not take them seriously at all and directly stepped in front of them. Chapter 47-53. Ji Tianqing stood outside the study while the guards were caught off guard. In the spacious and brightly lit study, a tall and burly middle-aged God race man with a dignified appearance was handling official business at his desk. This man wore a dark golden robe and a dazzling golden crown, exuding a noble and powerful aura. He was the ruler of this region, the master of the Nine-Yang Divine Palace, the Nine-Yang God Emperor. In addition to him, there were 2 other middle-aged men from the Protoss in the study. They were both dressed as middle-aged scholars and looked very knowledgeable. These 2 middle-aged upper divine kings were trusted aides of the Nine-Yang God Emperor. They were advisors that he had brought from the divine world. In the last 10-some years, the Nine-Yang God Emperor had taken root in this unknown land, establishing his own sect and establishing the Nine-Yang Divine Palace. He had never thought of submitting to the 4 God Palaces, nor did he want to compete with the other God Palaces for favor like the other 5 God Emperors. In contrast, he was starting from scratch. Thus, he worked harder than the other God Emperors. He had to do his best to develop his faction and strengthen his foundation. He was confident that, given a few hundred or even a few thousand years, he would be strong enough to surpass the 4 God Palaces. But right now, he was just starting out, and this was the most difficult time. Not only did he have to show tolerance and acceptance, but he also had to show magnanimity. While accepting the various races, he also had to ensure that there were no internal conflicts and disagreements, and he had to find a way to resolve them. Everything was a drain on his mental and physical strength, a waste of his time. As a result, he had very little time to cultivate in seclusion in the last 10-some years. Of the 5 God Emperors, he was not the weakest, but he was not the strongest either. At the very least, he was only at the middle God Emperor level and had only condensed 4 Dao ripples. This was already very difficult. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Even though it was late at night, the 9 young god emperor was still patiently reviewing memorials under the lamplight. Not long after, he had approved more than a dozen memorials and threw them to the 2 strategists. He said in a deep voice, "This emperor has already taken care of these matters. You just have to follow the instructions on the memorials. Those damned lowly commoners, no matter how detestable and hateful they are, we have to tolerate them at this stage. That's because we still need them. We need them to help this emperor prove this emperor's wise decision." The 2 strategists hurriedly nodded to show that they understood. They took the memorials and bowed to the 9 young god emperor before turning to leave. When they left the study, the 9 young god emperor leaned back in his chair with a tired look on his face. He closed his eyes and rubbed his eyebrows. Sigh. I have to deal with these tedious affairs all day long. When will it end? If Tanya can break through to the God Emperor realm as soon as possible, with his intelligence and wisdom, it will be enough to help this emperor deal with these matters. At that time, I will definitely go into seclusion and cultivate for a few decades. The 9 young God Emperor muttered to himself. However, he did not notice that when the 2 strategists stepped out of the study, an invisible figure also stepped through the door and entered the study. A moment later, the door to the study closed and the room fell into silence. The 9 young God Emperor sighed with emotion. He was about to reinvigorate himself and continue to review the mountainous pile of memorials on the table. At this moment, a faint voice sounded. "Since you are so tired of living, why are you still alive?" This sudden voice of a young man caused the 9 young God Emperor to stiffen and his expression to change. He had to admit that the other party's words made sense. However, he couldn't figure out who had said those words. Who dared to be so bold as to speak nonsense in front of him? And why did this voice sound so familiar? Just as the 9 young God Emperor was in a daze, a dazzling sword light suddenly lit up 10 feet in front of him. Whoosh! It was a golden sword light that was 5 feet long. It appeared so suddenly and came so quickly that no one had expected it at all. The sword light was unparalleled in its sharpness and contained a terrifying aura that made one shiver in fear. The 9 young God Emperor had seen countless experts in his life, and even more so in the way of the sword. However, when this sword appeared, he had an intuition and a premonition in his heart. His consciousness told him that this sword did not come from an unknown expert, but from the man who had made his name with the sword and laughed proudly at the world. Kenshin. That's right. Only the god of swords, whose name shook the world, could stab out such a terrifying sword, causing one's heart to tremble. Lu Jiuyang had fought with Kenshin before and had even been injured by Kenshin's sword. Thus, he had no doubts about the style and power of this sword strike. In the moment of life and death, he had no time to react, dodge, or block. The only thing he could do was to gather all of his power in front of his head and chest to form a divine light barrier. This was the shortest and most effective way to save his life. And reality had proven that this move was indeed useful. Boom! Crack! In the next moment, the dazzling golden sword light viciously stabbed into the divine power barrier in front of him, exploding with a deafening boom. Violent energy exploded, carrying with it countless shards of divine power as it scattered in every direction. The bright and spacious study was instantly reduced to rubble, smoke and dust rising into the air. Even the defensive divine array of the study could not withstand such a violent impact and was blasted to pieces. The 9 young God Emperor's divine power barrier was shattered, and his entire body was sent flying by the massive impact. He crashed through the wall of the study and crashed into the rubble on the ground. Of course, this sword strike had not only left him in a sorry state, it had also left him with significant injuries. He had tilted his head in the nick of time, so the sword had not pierced through his head, only his shoulder. By the time he crawled up from the rubble, his right shoulder was bleeding profusely, drenching his golden robe. Kenshin. It really is you. The Nine-Yang God Emperor's reaction was extremely fast. He immediately rushed out of the rubble and flew into the sky. His heart was filled with fear as he glared at Ji Tianqing with eyes as sharp as lightning. He subconsciously shouted these words. Ji Tianqing's guess was correct. Before Dao Xingyun died, he had indeed sent a message to Lu Jiuyang and the God Emperor of the Underworld, informing them of Kenshin's arrival. When Lu Jiuyang heard the news, he was indeed shocked and incredulous. However, after he came to his senses, he analyzed the series of events that followed. He knew that Kenshin would definitely not let them go after coming to the planet of origin. He would definitely seek revenge. Since Kenshin had already killed the Azura God Emperor and Dao Xingyun, it proved that Kenshin's strength was not to be underestimated, and he would definitely be able to kill him. However, he had one advantage, which was that he did not ally with the 4 divine temples, nor did he join any of the divine temples. He had been hiding in an unknown place all this time, gathering beings from all over the world to form his own living beings. In his expectation, Kenshin would definitely seek revenge from the 4 divine temples first, then the other god emperors, before coming after him. End of chapter. Chapter 47-54. Lu Jiuyang had always thought that he would have at least 3 to 5 years to make sufficient preparations. After all, he was hiding in a very remote and unknown place. Even the other god emperors didn't know where he was hiding. Even if Kenshin came to find him, it would take a lot of time and effort. He wanted to strengthen his forces as much as possible in just a few years and absorb more powerhouses. However, he didn't expect that Kenshin would appear in front of him after leaving the Taiyu Shrine for only a few months. Was it because the heavens didn't open their eyes, or was he just too unlucky? At this time, the two of them were facing each other in the sky above the ruins, their bodies bursting with strong murderous intent. Ji Tianqing was no longer invisible and showed his original appearance. Lu Jiuyang glared at him fiercely and shouted, "Sword God!" Back then, the 5 of us spent thousands of years and used so much manpower and material resources to break through the chaotic fog and enter the planet of origin. How did you sneak into the planet of origin alone in such a short time? Ji Tianqing sneered and said, "Of course, I followed behind you. That's why I got in so easily. Lu Jiuyang, aren't you just trying to stall for time by talking so much nonsense? Wishful thinking. Tonight will be the day you die." Ji Tianqing shouted coldly and immediately unleashed all his power. He waved the burial of heaven again and attacked Lu Jiuyang. Whoosh! Whoosh! He used a sword technique and released a dozen dazzling golden sword lights, slashing at Lu Jiuyang. The sharp sword lights blocked all of Lu Jiuyang's escape routes, leaving him nowhere to run. Lu Jiuyang was very helpless. He could only use all his strength to form a dazzling divine shield to block the attack of the sword lights. At the same time, he also took out 2 sabers and used the 9-yang divine saber that he was proud of, slashing out more than 25 colored saber lights. Bang! 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 The saber lights and the sword lights collided, creating a dull sound that echoed between heaven and earth. More than 25 colored saber lights were shattered and scattered in all directions. Lu Jiuyang's divine power shield was also shattered, exploding into countless fragments of divine light. The powerful impact once again sent him flying out, tumbling and crashing into the palace. More than half of the palace had collapsed, and bricks and debris were scattered all over the ground. When Lu Jiuyang crawled out of the ruins, he was already drenched in blood from head to toe. His disheveled appearance was very wretched. His waist and chest had been penetrated by the sword light, leaving behind 2 hideous and terrifying wounds that were constantly bleeding. Damn it! How could you? Previously, it was Ji Tianqing who attacked him. He didn't have time to block or dodge, so it was excusable that Ji Tianqing's sword pierced through his shoulder. But this time, he was already prepared. The two of them clashed head-on, but he was unable to resist and was once again injured by Ji Tianqing. This meant that Ji Tianqing's combat strength far exceeded his. He couldn't believe it. He couldn't imagine that the reborn Kenshin was even more heaven-defying than before. Not only did he surpass the God Emperor in just a few hundred years, but he also far surpassed them. In the past, he received news that Kenshin had assassinated the Azura God Emperor and Dao Xinyan. He thought that Kenshin had succeeded through trickery. But now, it seemed that even if the two of them fought head-on, no one would be able to defeat Kenshin. Since he was sure that he was no match for Kenshin, Lu Jiuyang didn't want to continue fighting and didn't want to be entangled with his opponent. Run! I have to escape from here first. Staying alive is the most important thing. This thought flashed through Lu Jiuyang's mind, and he subconsciously looked at the night sky to his left. Tens of thousands of feet to his left, there was an inconspicuous divine palace that hid one of his trump cards. He estimated that his trump card should have been awakened, and it was time to make a move. Just as expected. Ji Tianqing took advantage of the victory to pursue and attack. He once again waved the burial of heaven and attacked Lu Jiuyang. But at this moment, a dazzling cold light lit up in the dark night sky. It carried an unparalleled fierce aura and attacked Ji Tianqing. It was a blade light that was like a cold moon. It was launched by a hazy black shadow and aimed directly at the back of Ji Tianqing's head. The hazy black shadow was also an expert of the God Emperor, and it was best at hiding and assassination. It was born to be one with the night. Even if Lu Jiuyang knew this trump card very well, he wasn't confident that he could neutralize this attack when he wasn't prepared. In a quarter of an instant, the cold moon blade light crossed the distance of tens of thousands of feet and stabbed at the back of Ji Tianqing's head. In the next moment, his head would be pierced by the blade light and he would die on the spot. At the very least, the blade light would be able to pierce through his divine power shield and severely injure him. However, something that Lu Jiuyang didn't expect happened. Ji Tianqing ignored the attack of the hazy black shadow and continued to attack him with all his strength. At the same time, a divine light flashed in the night sky behind Ji Tianqing, and a graceful purple figure appeared. It was a beautiful woman of the God clan. She wore a purple dress and held a divine sword in her hand. Her expression was cold and proud. Her target was the hazy black shadow. Swish! A cold sword light suddenly appeared, illuminating the night sky and dispelling the darkness. It blocked the purple figure and the hazy black shadow. Bang! The cold moon blade light and the cold sword light collided with each other accurately and there was a muffled sound. Then, divine light burst out and energy spread everywhere. The hazy black shadow was forced back tens of thousands of feet. It let out a painful groan and hid in the darkness again. The purple figure was also forced back tens of thousands of feet. It stood proudly on the ruins and looked ahead with a vigilant expression, searching for traces of the hazy black shadow. Lu Jiuyang was a little stunned. He stared at the purple figure and couldn't help but exclaim in shock. Damn it! It's you, Pan Ruo. Lu Jiuyang didn't expect that the woman who had blocked Kenshin's fatal attack at the critical moment was the Pan Ruo God Emperor. One had to know that the 5 God Emperors were still in an alliance. Even though the Azura God Emperor and Dao Xinyan were dead, none of them expressed any intention of leaving the alliance. He had thought that the Pan Ruo God Emperor had been killed by Kenshin. But reality slapped him hard in the face. Not only was the Pan Ruo God Emperor not dead, but she had also joined forces with Kenshin. He. Women. That's women. The ancients didn't lie to me. Only women and villains are difficult to deal with. The shock, and disbelief quickly dissipated. The Pan Ruo God Emperor immediately understood the reason. First, the Pan Ruo God Emperor was the only woman in the alliance of the 5 God Emperors. Second, even though the Pan-Rua god emperor had participated in the encirclement of Kenshin and was one of the Kenshin's murderers, she had still loved Kenshin deeply. A woman who had loved Kenshin deeply, betrayed the alliance of the 5 god emperors and returned to Kenshin's embrace. Wasn't this normal? At this moment, Lu Jiuyang's heart was filled with anger, hatred, and endless contempt. Chapter 47-55. If there was still time, Lu Jiuyang would definitely question Pan-Rua as to why she was doing this. He would even scold Hanya in disdain, humiliating her until she was covered in cuts and bruises. Unfortunately, he did not have the time. Kenshin was already in front of him. 9 resplendent golden sword beams had sealed off his surroundings, leaving him with no way to escape. He could have taken the opportunity to escape while Stacked Shadow was sneaking an attack on Kenshin. However, he had taken an extra glance at Pan-Rua, causing him to miss his only chance to escape. At this moment, all he could do was use all his strength to conjure a defensive shield and brandish his battle saber to use his best skills. 9 Yang Divine Saber's 6th move, Blazing Sun burns the heavens. Lu Jiuyang roared angrily as he held the 9 Yang battle saber with both hands. His body emitted a fiery glow as he slashed out a 1,000-foot-long golden blade. He was as dazzling as the blazing sun, illuminating the entire 9 Yang Divine Palace. The terrifyingly high temperature melted all the palaces, courtyards, and bricks in 100,000 feet radius into magma. All that was left in this region was boundless flames. It was dark red in color. Boom! A quarter of an instant later, the 9 golden sword beams struck the golden blade, producing a loud explosion. The golden blade collapsed, sending out divine light fragments that scattered across the world. 3 of the 9 golden sword lights were shattered, and the remaining 6 sword lights viciously slashed at Lu Jiuyang. His divine power shield was shattered, sending out divine light fragments that filled the sky. The incomparably violent impact sent him flying backwards, smashing heavily into the dark red lava. Pwah! This time, Lu Jiuyang's injuries were even more serious. When he crawled out of the magma, blood spewed out of his nose and mouth, making him look even more wretched. His face was as white as a sheet, and the golden robes he wore had long become tattered. His divine power had been greatly depleted, causing his combat strength to plummet rapidly. He was in a terrible state. However, he did not lose his rationality, nor did he attack Ji Tianqing in anger. He glanced at the battle situation not far away and saw Pan-Rua God Emperor and Stacked Shadow fighting in the night sky. The 2 figures were constantly flashing before he turned and fled. Folded Shadow was a desolate race God Emperor that he had recruited a few years ago. He was very eccentric. However, he had used many methods and spent a lot of effort to recruit Folded Shadow. Fold Shadow was a hybrid of the Desolate race and the Beast race, but he had offended the 2 divine temples 1,000 years ago. He was not tolerated by Tai Yu and the Pantheon of Immortality. Helplessly, Folded Shadow could only sneak into unknown lands and work with the beasts and other races to survive until now. When Lu Jiuyang recruited Folded Shadow, he had promised him that when his forces were strong enough to contend against the 2 great temples in the future, he would definitely avenge him. Lu Jiuyang had never revealed the double shadow to the outside world after taking it as his subordinate. He had always kept it as a trump card and would only use it at a critical moment. Tonight, he had no choice but to let Layered Shadow take action. Who would have thought that Kenshin would have come prepared as well? He actually had the Prajna God Emperor take action to tie down the double shadow. Now, Stacked Shadow couldn't even take care of himself and couldn't help Lu Jiuyang. He could only escape first. Whoosh! Lu Jiuyang didn't have time to treat his injuries. He suddenly unleashed his divine power and used his instant movement to pass through several layers of defensive arrays and escape into the night sky. However, Ji Tianqing was already prepared. He actually used the spacetime blade and cut off the space in front of him with a giant sword. With the space cut off, Lu Zhuoyang naturally couldn't teleport. He could only go around the huge spatial crack. Taking this opportunity, Ji Tianqing chased after him. He brandished the Burial of Heaven and used all kinds of sword Dao techniques, forcing Lu Zhuoyang to retreat again and again. Even though there were thousands of God King guards rushing over from all directions and bravely attacking Ji Tianqing, they weren't strong enough. Even if they attacked without any regard for their own safety, they couldn't do much damage to Ji Tianqing. On the other hand, the shockwaves from Ji Tianqing and Lu Zhuoyang's battle could easily injure them and even kill many guards instantly. The two fought for several minutes, passed through several layers of defensive arrays, and left Ninyang Divine Palace. Even though Lu Zhuoyang had successfully escaped Ninyang Divine Palace, he was killed by Ji Tianqing because of his severe injuries when he was 100,000 miles away from Ninyang Divine Palace. Kaboom! A giant golden sword that was as bright as the sun slashed down and drowned Lu Zhuoyang's figure. Lu Zhuoyang, who was riddled with wounds and weakened greatly, was cut in half on the spot. He was almost powerless to resist. The divine body that had been tempered thousands of times shattered under the sword light, and blood splattered everywhere. After his head exploded, Lu Zhuoyang's godhead was also shattered. 16 pieces of godhead fragments fluttered in the night sky, glowing with divine light. Not far from the battlefield, there were still more than 2,000 god race guards in the night sky tens of thousands of miles away. They were doing their best to pursue. They were loyal to Lu Zhuoyang, and their leader was Lu Zhuoyang's last disciple and the former commander of his guards. However, everyone saw the scene of Lu Zhuoyang being killed with their own eyes. At this moment, the entire place was silent. Only the dull sound of the explosion still reverberated between heaven and earth. More than 2,000 guards were stunned. Their faces were filled with fear and disbelief. The Ninyang God Emperor, who was incomparably powerful and almost invincible in their hearts, was actually killed so easily by someone. Everyone looked at Kenshin, their eyes full of fear and reverence. A moment later, the divine light that filled the sky dissipated. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and grabbed Lu Zhuoyang's godhead fragment. At this time, the 2,000 guards came back to their senses. The middle-aged god race man in the lead was called Tanyi, and he was Lu Zhuoyang's last disciple. He suppressed the shock and fear in his heart and shouted, "Quickly retreat. Where there is life, there is hope." Like all the guards, he found it hard to accept Lu Zhuoyang's death and hated Kenshin to the core. But at this time, he had to maintain his rationality and absolutely could not lead the guards to continue charging. That was not to avenge his master, but to seek his own death and die in vain. What he had to do was to preserve his strength as much as possible and lead all his master's loyal subordinates to get rid of Kenshin's pursuit. They would find a place to live incognito and quietly develop and grow stronger. One day in the future, when he also became a god emperor powerhouse and his forces were strong enough, he would kill Kenshin to avenge his master. Not only Tanyi thought so, the two middle-aged strategists and several guard commanders also thought so. Thus, everyone came back to their senses and turned around to flee. Only 100 or so of Lu Zhuoyang's diehard followers were unable to accept the fact that Lu Zhuoyang was killed. They were so angry that their eyes were about to burst as they roared and rushed toward Ji Tianqing. There was no need to doubt the result. After Ji Tianqing collected the spoils of war, he brandished the Heaven Burier sword and executed a few divine abilities and lost skills. More than half of the guards were killed and beaten to a pulp. Then, he rapidly teleported in the night sky to chase after Tanyi and the guards. Chapter 47-56. Tanyi and the two strategists could think of preserving their strength first and take revenge after strengthening their forces in the future. Ji Tianqing had come prepared, so how could he not have guessed their thoughts? Even though Tanyi and those guards could not threaten him for the time being and might not be able to threaten him in the future. But he was used to cutting weeds and eliminating the roots, not leaving any future troubles. Naturally, he had to kill Tan Yi and the rest. Even if he could not annihilate Lu Zhuoyang's old subordinates, he had to kill Tan Yi and the 2 strategists, as well as a few guard commanders. After dealing with these leaders, the remaining guards would be like a plate of loose sand. It would be difficult for them to become capable and not be a concern. Swish! In the blink of an eye, Ji Tianqing teleported 30,000 miles and caught up with a group of guards and 2 guard commanders. Without saying a word, he raised the sword of burial of heaven and slashed out a sword light. It was as if a rain of swords covered the sky and enveloped over 1,000 guards. All the guards turned pale with fright and were filled with fear. Some scattered and fled in all directions. Some used all their strength to condense a shield in a futile attempt to resist. Only to hear a series of muffled sounds and explosions. Divine light burst forth in the sky. Bloody light danced in the air. There were also many corpses and debris flying out. Ji Tianqing only used one move and instantly killed over 200 Divine King Realm guards and injured over 100 people. Including those 2 high Divine King Guard commanders, they also failed to escape this calamity and lost their lives on the spot. Ji Tianqing did not stop. He brandished the sword of burial of heaven and continued to attack. Before long, the remaining few hundred guards were also killed in a disorderly manner. Blood rain filled the sky. Only a few people escaped with their lives. In order not to waste time, Ji Tianqing did not chase after those few guards who escaped. He continued to fly in the direction of Ninyang Divine Palace. He chased after Tan Yi and the 2 strategists, as well as over 1,000 guards. Tan Yi and the rest had already fled long ago. When they saw Ji Tianqing slaughtering those guards, they were scared out of their wits and were filled with fear. When escaping, everyone gave it their all. They even did not hesitate to use all kinds of forbidden techniques and divine abilities. However, these people were still unlucky in the end. Hanya God Emperor and Stacked Shadow fought hundreds of moves in Ninyang Divine Palace. They were evenly matched. No one could defeat the other. Considering that there were many guards inside and outside the Divine Palace and that there would be an endless stream of reinforcements, Hanya God Emperor could only rush out of Ninyang Divine Palace and chase after Ji Tianqing and Lu Zhuoyang. Overlapping Shadow didn't hesitate and chased after Pan Ruo God Emperor to the east. However, after flying for tens of thousands of miles, they discovered with their spiritual awareness that Lu Zhuoyang had been killed by Ji Tianqing. At that time, Hanya God's spirit. Stacked Shadow's body stiffened and he lost all confidence. He no longer bothered with Pan Ruo God Emperor and turned to flee. Although he had reached an agreement with Lu Zhuoyang to secretly join the Ninyang Divine Palace. But he had only followed Lu Zhuoyang for a few years. He was not that loyal, and it was impossible for him to sell his life for the other party. Since Lu Zhuoyang was already killed, his agreement with Lu Zhuoyang was naturally cancelled. He would definitely not avenge Lu Zhuoyang and risk his life against Hanya and Ji Tianqing. Stacked Shadow was good at concealment and assassination. His escape methods were also very brilliant. He hid in the darkness and disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. Hanya God Emperor chased for a while. Seeing that Stacked Shadow had escaped far away, she gave up the chase. She was planning to meet up with Ji Tianqing when she ran into Tan Yi and the guards who were fleeing in panic. The result could be imagined. Hanya did not hesitate to brandish her divine sword and started to kill Tan Yi and the guards. The gloomy night sky was immediately filled with dazzling divine light. All kinds of blade lights and sword shadows collided in the air, exploding into countless fragments of divine light. Broken corpses fell from the night sky one after another, accompanied by fragments of divine light. Mournful screams and painful howls also reverberated in the air. Hanya God Emperor was unstoppable. With an unparalleled posture, she wantonly slaughtered those guards. Tan Yi and the 2 strategists were the smartest. They instigated the guards to besiege Hanya while they took the opportunity to escape. But how could their schemes and actions be hidden from Hanya? Hanya immediately changed her target and went all out to intercept Tan Yi and the two strategists. The powerful divine might of a god emperor enveloped Tan Yi and the two strategists, making it difficult for them to move as if they were trapped in a quagmire. In less than 20 breaths of time, Hanya god emperor killed more than 100 guards and two strategists. Only Tan Yi was left alive, but his eyes were also full of panic as he fled in panic. At this time, Ji Tianqing finally arrived. As early as tens of thousands of miles away, his divine sense had already locked onto Tan Yi. After rushing into the battlefield, he naturally went straight to Tan Yi. Swish! 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 Another series of Sword Dao divine abilities were unleashed. Sword light filled the sky, enveloping Tan Yi and the dozens of guards beside him. Following a burst of muffled sounds, Tan Yi was minced into pieces by the sword light on the spot. Even the guards beside him were also blasted into dregs, dying without an intact corpse. After dealing with these core figures, Ji Tianqing and Hanya God Emperor joined hands to kill the remaining guards. Everyone collapsed and fled in all directions. They were utterly defeated and retreated without any order. However, thousands of guards fled in different directions. There would still be some fish that escaped the net. Ji Tianqing and Hanya God Emperor chased for 15 minutes and killed more than 800 guards, but more than 100 people still escaped. Of course, if they insisted on chasing after them, they could still kill all the guards. It was just that they didn't want to waste time, so they spared the lives of those guards. The battle in the night sky ended, and the world returned to tranquility. The divine light that filled the sky receded, and the night sky returned to darkness. Ji Tianqing and Hanya gathered together. He cast a concerned look at Hanya and asked, "How's your situation? Are you injured?" Hanya God Emperor glanced at him, shook her head, and said, "I'm fine." Seeing that she was indeed not injured, Ji Tianqing was relieved and asked again, "Let's go and take a look at Ninyang Divine Palace. Let's see how much resources and wealth Lu Jiuyang has plundered these years." It just so happened that he didn't have many cultivation resources on hand. Now that he had killed Lu Jiuyang, he naturally had to loot the treasury and plunder the wealth and resources. Hanya God Emperor shook her head again and said, "I'm not interested. You go by yourself." Since she didn't want to go, Ji Tianqing also didn't force her. He opened the entrance of Nine Heavens 10 Absolutes Pagoda and let her return to the distorted spacetime to cultivate. Ji Tianqing returned to Ninyang Divine Palace alone to plunder the spoils of war. At that moment, Ninyang Divine Palace had long fallen into chaos. There were ruins everywhere, with broken walls and billowing dust. 80% of the palaces and buildings had been destroyed. The Divine Guard's main forces had also been wiped out. Even though there were still more than 10,000 living beings in Ninyang Divine Palace, they had long fled. Most of the living beings were from the beast race, with a small number of desolate race and other races. They had pledged allegiance to Ninyang Divine Palace for various reasons. They had only been loyal to Lu Jiuyang for more than 10 years, so it was impossible for them to be too loyal. Therefore, after the battle, many people had secretly fled. When Ji Tianqing returned to the sky above the ruins, there were only about 2,000 living beings left in Ninyang Divine Palace. Furthermore, there were many people plundering the treasures, preparing to flee with the treasures. Chapter 47-57. The alien lifeform's thoughts were simple. Ninyang Divine Palace had only been established recently, and its foundation was not yet stable. If it suddenly encountered a disaster, it would most likely be heavily damaged or destroyed. Since that was the case, they might as well take the opportunity to sweep away the treasures. While leaving the danger, they could also prepare for the future. However, they neglected one thing. After the 9 young god emperor had established this faction, he understood the importance of wealth and resources better than anyone else. Therefore, the treasury of 9 young divine palace was more heavily guarded than any other place, and there were more defensive formations set up. The alien lifeforms tried all sorts of methods, but they were unable to break into 9 young divine palace's treasury. Even the guards guarding the treasury had left their posts for various reasons, and some had even fled for their lives. However, the greedy alien lifeforms were still attacking the defensive formations with all their might, trying to break into the treasury and plunder all sorts of resources and treasures. Ji Tianqing looked down at the scene. After seeing this, he did not waste any words and directly released his vast divine might. Whoosh! Immediately, the divine might belonging to a celestial emperor powerhouse enveloped the entire 9 young divine palace. All the lifeforms within a radius of tens of thousands of miles were startled awake. This included the alien lifeforms who were attacking the defensive formations and the treasury in a frenzy, wanting to plunder the treasures. All the living beings raised their heads and stared at the sky in astonishment, staring at Ji Tianqing. They were all stunned. They had not expected such a terrifying powerhouse to appear at this juncture. In an instant, many people understood. That unfamiliar alien powerhouse was a god emperor. Moreover, it was the god emperor who had attacked and killed the 9 young god emperor. Since this god emperor had appeared, and the 9 young god emperor was nowhere to be found, that meant, the 9 young god emperor had been defeated. The meaning of defeat was very broad. It could mean that Lu Jiuyang had been defeated and had fled with serious injuries. It could also mean that Lu Jiuyang had been killed and had fallen. Therefore, most of the lifeforms were very smart and decisively chose to flee. Whoosh! 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 Countless beams of divine light lit up the night sky. They were like shooting stars, flying as fast as lightning into the distance. Within the span of 2 breaths, 70% of the non-humankind beings had fled. However, nearly 30% of the non-humankind beings were either unrepentant, greedy, or unaware of the severity of the situation. They were still in the 9 young divine palace, and were not even willing to give up on the treasury. Ji Tianqing frowned and released a cold killing intent that once again enveloped the entire divine palace. This time, even a fool would understand that if they didn't retreat, their lives would be in danger. The God Emperor's display of divine might was only a warning. And now, the God Emperor was thoroughly enraged, clearly displaying his killing intent. If they didn't leave, there was only one outcome for them, and that was to be killed by the God Emperor. Thus, the remaining 30% of foreign beings also fled with their tails between their legs. Even if there were a few non-humankind beings who weren't afraid of death, they still remained in the 9 young divine palace, unable to pose any threat to Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing casually sent out a few rays of sword light, locking onto those foreign beings and insta-killing them. It wasn't that he was cruel and bloodthirsty, but that those foreign beings were deranged and had a reason for their deaths. At this point, there was no one else in the 9 young divine palace. Ji Tianqing landed outside the treasury. Even he had to think of a way to break the defensive formation before he could enter the treasury. There was no doubt that the defensive formation of the treasury was composed of an emperor-grade divine formation and many supreme-grade divine formations. Ji Tianqing spent 2 hours to break the emperor-grade defensive formation. After that, he didn't need to waste too much time and energy to break the supreme-grade divine formations. 4 hours later, Ji Tianqing successfully entered the 9 young divine palace's treasury. Most of the guards guarding the treasury had fled without a trace, their whereabouts unknown. Even if there were a few guards left, they were no match for Ji Tianqing and were instantly annihilated. Next, it was time for Ji Tianqing to collect the spoils of war and count his gains. The treasury hidden deep underground was, in fact, an alternate dimension. All kinds of cultivation resources, treasures, and materials were piled up like mountains in the treasury, forming mountain ranges. Ji Tianqing didn't stand on ceremony and put all of them into his spatial ring. Of course, while collecting all kinds of cultivation resources and treasures, he didn't forget to count the value of the various resources and treasures. This process took him a total of 6 hours. 6 hours later, he left the treasury of Nine-Yang Divine Palace and flew into the distant night sky. This time, his attack on Phoenix Ridge and Nine-Yang Divine Palace could be said to have reaped great rewards. Not only did he kill his old enemy, the Nine-Yang God Emperor, taking revenge, but he also collected hundreds of trillions of cultivation resources. This was despite the fact that the Nine-Yang God Emperor had only ruled this region for a dozen or so years. But in the past dozen or so years, he had been constantly attacking cities and conquering various tribes and factions. Every time he conquered and won, he would obtain vast amounts of cultivation resources and treasures. Those hundreds of trillions of cultivation resources and treasures could be said to be the accumulation of the Nine-Yang God Emperor over the past dozen or so years. Originally, the Nine-Yang God Emperor had hoped to use those cultivation resources and treasures to expand his forces. But he didn't expect that in the end, before he could fulfill his wish, he would be killed by Ji Tianqing. After leaving the Nine-Yang Divine Palace's territory, Ji Tianqing returned to the god-slaying battleship and flew east. The plan he had previously devised had not changed. He was still going to pass through the unknown lands and rush to the Pantheon of Immortality's territory to find the god of the underworld. At this point, he had already killed 3 of his old enemies, the 5 god emperors. Excluding the Prajna god emperor, his only enemy left was the god of the underworld. When he was able to kill the Netherworld Divine Emperor, he would be able to take his revenge and wipe out his hatred. But this matter was definitely not that simple, and he had long been mentally prepared. After leaving the unknown lands, even if he entered the Pantheon of Immortality's territory, he had to be careful. A few hours later, the god-slaying battleship was far away from the Nine-Yang Divine Palace. At this time, the battleship had already been replaced by the White Dragon. Ji Tianqing had already returned to the distorted spacetime to count the spoils of war. The cultivation resources and treasures he had plundered from the Nine-Yang Divine Palace were just some supplementary items. In fact, his greatest gain this time was Lu Zhuoyang's Divine Spark Fragment, Lu Zhuoyang's Spatial Ring, and the Emperor-grade Divine Artifact he had left behind. After Lu Zhuoyang was killed, his Spatial Ring became an ownerless item, and Ji Tianqing could open it at will. He spent a few hours looking through Lu Zhuoyang's Spatial Ring. The results were just as he had expected. The treasures and cultivation resources that Lu Zhuoyang valued the most were indeed hidden in the Spatial Ring. The resources and treasures he had plundered from the treasury were only worth a few hundred trillion. And the cultivation resources and treasures hidden in Lu Zhuoyang's Spatial Ring were worth more than 500 trillion. Chapter 47-58. The cultivation resources and wealth that Ji Tianqing had accumulated in the past were only enough for his subordinates to use for another 200 to 300 years. Now that he had obtained Lu Zhuoyang's life savings and the wealth that he had painstakingly plundered, he could double the time. In the short term, Ji Tianqing did not have to worry about cultivation resources for the time being. He took out 2 more spoils of war and examined them carefully. One was Lu Zhuoyang's battle saber, a true emperor-level divine weapon that had not been damaged in the battle. After Lu Zhuoyang's death, this battle saber had become an ownerless item. Ji Tianqing temporarily kept it for future distribution. The battle saber also had an internal space. It was like a small world that could accommodate hundreds of billions of living beings. When Lu Zhuoyang first came to the planet of origin, he had brought 50,000 elite soldiers with him. After ruling the unknown lands and establishing the Nine-Yang Divine Palace, Lu Zhuoyang had selected 10,000 elites to serve as the palace's guards and carry out orders and missions. The remaining 40,000 soldiers were all left in the internal world of the Divine Saber to peacefully reproduce and cultivate. After Ji Tianqing obtained the Nine-Yang Battle Saber, the 40,000 soldiers in the internal world were still unaware of the changes in the outside world. They also did not know that Lu Jiuyang had been killed. Just like Dao Xingyun's situation, after Dao Xingyun was killed, the soldiers under his command were also unaware. Ji Tianqing temporarily ignored the 40,000 soldiers in the Nine-Yang battle saber. He would deal with them when the time was right in the future. After all, he had used a few days to refine the Nine-Yang battle saber. As long as he did not take the initiative to open the internal world of the battle saber, the 40,000 soldiers would not be able to come out. The second spoil of war was Lu Jiuyang's divine warship. This was also Lu Jiuyang's natal divine weapon. It was also an emperor-level divine weapon. Ji Tianqing already had the god-slaying battleship. Therefore, after killing Dao Xingyun and Lu Jiuyang, he had obtained 2 emperor-level battleships but had no use for them. He decided to spend a few decades repairing and modifying the 2 battleships to improve the quality and power of the battleships. After the 2 battleships were modified, he would give them to Yun Yao and Ji Ku. If he had time in the future, he would reforge Lu Jiuyang and Dao Xingyun's weapons and modify them to suit Yun Yao and Ji Ku. After all, those spoils of war were all emperor-level divine artifacts. It would be a waste to break them down into refining materials. He could only modify them and continue to use them. Ji Tianqing then started to refine Lu Jiuyang's godhead fragments. Among the many spoils of war, this was the most important one. White Dragon steered the god-slaying battleship toward the east at a leisurely pace. However, after flying east for 8 days, he received an order from his master. So, he controlled the God-Slaughter battleship to hide in a desolate and dangerous mountain range, and he went underground to lay dormant. In this region, there were no desolate race, beast race, or other races in a radius of millions of miles. The deity-slaying battleship was hiding here to rest and reorganize. There was no need to be afraid of being discovered or disturbed. Time passed silently. In the unknown lands and the Pantheon of Immortality's territory, there were undercurrents surging. Unknown changes were happening. The 3 beast race territorial lords were still guarding the borders of the unknown lands with their 10,000 beast race elites. They had made up their minds. As long as nothing unexpected happened, they would not leave the unknown lands. On the other side, the 6 Hall Masters of the Taiyu Shrine had already entered the Pantheon of Immortality's territory with their battleships. In order to expand their search area and increase their search efficiency, they had split into 2 fleets. One was led by the 1st Hall Master, while the other was led by the 2nd Hall Master. Both fleets concealed their tracks and auras. They searched the Pantheon of Immortality's territory for information regarding Ji Tianqing. The results were indisputable. They had exhausted all their means and methods, and spent 2 months, but they were unable to obtain any useful information. At the same time, the Pantheon of Immortality's 1st Hall Master led thousands of elite godly kings and rushed to the western region. Under his orders, the various Hall Masters gathered a large number of elite soldiers and rushed to the western border to be on standby. The battle at the border had ended long ago. The god of the underworld and the 4 Hall Masters had retreated to a safe area and rested for 2 months. Most of the soldiers' injuries had stabilized, and their combat strength had recovered greatly. Now, the immortal God Emperor had arrived with reinforcements. They could regroup and fight the Taiyu Shrine's fleet again. However, they searched the entire border but could not find the Taiyu Shrine's fleet. The 6 Hall Masters had disappeared without a trace. This made the immortal God Emperor very angry. He cursed the Taiyu Shrine's Hall Masters from head to toe. He had mobilized tens of thousands of elite soldiers and gathered them from the various branches to the western border in order to fight a great battle against the Universe Temple. However, the Taiyu Shrine's Hall Masters had slipped away and disappeared without a trace. What was this? The immortal God Emperor naturally knew that the Taiyu Shrine's Hall Masters had come with ill intentions. They would not let this matter rest. Even if the 6 warships had disappeared, they would not have retreated to an unknown place and returned to the Taiyu Shrine. There was a 95% chance that they had infiltrated the Pantheon of Immortality's territory. This thought infuriated the immortal God Emperor and filled his heart with worry. The Taiyu Shrine has turned out in full force. If they had come to fight us, then I would have had a chance to deal with them. In my territory, I could have gathered thousands of soldiers and fought them to the end. However, they have snuck into my territory and disappeared without a trace. They must be plotting something. Even if they did not resort to any tricks, killing and looting everywhere, they could have caused chaos in my hall and made the people panic. However, they can come and go like ghosts and escape as they please. It is not easy for me to catch them. Alas! The immortal God Emperor's heart clenched at the thought that the Taiyu Shrine's hall masters could bring great disaster and turmoil to the Pantheon of Immortality. However, since things had developed to this point, he had no choice but to passively respond and act according to the circumstances. He first ordered the various halls to tighten their defenses and increase their patrols and vigilance. Once there was an abnormal situation, they were to report it immediately. Then, he ordered the hall masters to lead thousands of elite god kings to the various halls to search for the Taiyu Shrine's fleet. Once they found traces of the fleet, they were not to alert the enemy. They only needed to report the information. As long as the 6 hall masters of the Taiyu Shrine dared to break up and cause trouble in the Pantheon of Immortality's territory, the immortal God Emperor was confident that he could annihilate them one by one. Thus, the powerhouses of the 2 halls began to secretly compete with each other. The Pantheon of Immortality seemed calm at the moment, but in reality, there were already undercurrents surging. A storm was brewing. This was especially true for the dozen or so halls in the west. They could feel the stifling atmosphere before a great battle. Many hall masters and powerhouses had guessed that a great battle would break out soon. Chapter 47-59. The god-slaying battleship lay dormant in the southeast of the unknown lands for 3 whole months. 3 months later, the Pantheon of Immortality was surging with undercurrents. A great battle was imminent. Ji Tianqing had been in seclusion for more than 12 years in the distorted spacetime of the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes Pagoda. During these 12 years, he first refined Lu Jiuyang's Godhead fragment. After that, not only did he obtain a huge amount of divine power, but he also absorbed more than 100 types of divine Tao nomological laws and Lu Jiuyang's divine soul memories. Ji Tianqing's strength naturally increased. The number of divine Tao nomological laws he grasped was also getting closer and closer to 3,000. He was looking forward to the day when he condensed 3,000 great Taos. After finishing his cultivation, he also refined and modified Dao Xingyun and Lu Jiuyang's divine battleships. The power and quality of the 2 divine battleships increased. Then, he handed them to Yunyao and Ji Ku. Yunyao and Ji Ku had been following him all this time. They were either in the distorted spacetime or in the god-slaying battleship. They basically did not need the divine battleships. However, there was no harm in being prepared. He prepared 2 divine battleships for the 2 of them. They could be used as weapons at critical moments. After settling the matter of the 2 divine battleships, Ji Tianqing took out Lu Jiuyang and Dao Xingyun's natal divine weapons and modified them. He used the 2 divine weapons as a foundation and added a large number of top-notch materials to reforge the 2 divine weapons. In the end, he refined the 2 divine weapons into a divine spear and a divine sword. He gave them to Yunyao and Ji Ku respectively. The power of these 2 divine weapons had increased. They could greatly increase Yunyao and Ji Ku's combat power. By the time Ji Tianqing finished all these things, 12 years had already passed. He then ordered White Dragon to control the god-slaying battleship and rush to the Pantheon of Immortality. White Dragon had cultivated in the distorted spacetime for 12 years. His strength had increased again. His chances of breaking through to the God Emperor realm were getting higher. After receiving the order, he quickly controlled the god-slaying battleship and left the depths of the underground, heading straight east. Ji Tianqing and White Dragon both thought that since the incident had happened 3 months ago, the news must have died down by now. The Hall Masters of the Taiyu Shrine either fought with the Pantheon of Immortality or returned to the Taiyu Shrine empty-handed. However, this was only a conjecture between the master and disciple. There was no way to confirm it, so they still had to be careful. When White Dragon steered the god-slaying battleship, he still concealed his tracks and aura. He was extremely cautious. Half a month later, the god-slaying battleship passed through the unknown lands and successfully entered the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality. Of course, in front of them was the southern region of the Pantheon of Immortality, which was not far from the southern border. Just as Ji Tianqing expected, the Pantheon of Immortality and the experts of the Taiyu Shrine would never have imagined that he would enter the Pantheon of Immortality from here. No matter how many experts the two shrines had, how many defense lines they set up, and how many scouts and spies they arranged, it was impossible for them to monitor this place. The god-slaying battleship shuttled through the southern region of the Pantheon of Immortality as if it was entering uninhabited land. It passed through one shrine after another without being discovered by anyone. Ji Tianqing's target was the god of the underworld. In the past, the god of the underworld and the Pantheon of Immortality had not really formed an alliance. However, Ji Tianqing could predict that once the god of the underworld knew that he was coming for revenge, he would have no choice but to form an alliance with the Pantheon of Immortality to strengthen his own forces. Moreover, the god of the underworld would use flowery words and distort the truth to rope in the experts of the Pantheon of Immortality to deal with him together. Therefore, if he wanted to find the god of the underworld, he had to first find the headquarters of the Pantheon of Immortality. The god-slaying battleship flew through the southern region of the Pantheon of Immortality, but it was heading north. On the way, every time they passed by a shrine, Ji Tianqing would put away the god-slaying battleship and personally go to find out more information. The leader and deputy leader of each shrine were all peak divine kings. They were the most powerful experts. With Ji Tianqing's strength and methods, he could easily sneak into the headquarters of each shrine to find out more information. He could also eavesdrop on the conversations of the leaders and deputy leaders without being discovered. Although it was a waste of time, the benefits were obvious. The god-slaying battleship flew north for half a month. After passing through 5 shrines, Ji Tianqing found the information he needed. A few months ago, after we shook off those idiots from the Taiyu Shrine, they really went straight to the Pantheon of Immortality in the east. They set up traps and ambushes at the border of the unknown lands. They wanted to wait for us to come. Unexpectedly, the 4 leaders of the Pantheon of Immortality and the god of the underworld rushed to the border of the unknown lands. The god of the underworld had long guessed that I would seek him for revenge, so he decided to strike first. However, they didn't expect that they would meet at the border of the unknown lands. Without any preparation, they fought for several hours. In the cockpit of the god-slaying battleship, Ji Tianqing's lips curled into a cold smile. He told Bai Long about the information he had gathered. Bai Long listened with great interest. He was full of anticipation as he asked, "What happened after that? What was the result of the battle? Did the leaders of the Taiyu Shrine retreat?" Ji Tianqing shook his head. He continued, "The 6 leaders of the Taiyu Shrine gathered together. Even the God Emperor of the Taiyu Shrine personally took action. How could the 4 leaders of the Pantheon of Immortality be their match? Netherworld and the 4 leaders were beaten back. They retreated to the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality and rested in one of the western branches. When the God Emperor of the Immortal God Emperor received the news, he was furious. Not only did he personally lead thousands of elites to the western border to reinforce them. He also ordered dozens of branches to mobilize their elite god kings. He wanted to gather an army of 100,000 to fight the Taiyu Shrine. The result was obvious. By the time the God Emperor of the immortal God Emperor and his elite troops arrived, the leaders of the Taiyu Shrine had already disappeared without a trace. Bai Long immediately understood what he meant. He asked, "Master, you mean, the 6 leaders of the Taiyu Shrine didn't retreat? They sneaked into the territory of the Pantheon of Immortality and are still searching for us?" Ji Tianqing nodded. "That's right. The people of the Taiyu Shrine are looking for us, and we are looking for the god of the underworld. Netherworld and the God Emperor of the immortal God Emperor are searching for the people of the Taiyu Shrine. At the same time, they are also looking for us." Bai Long frowned. His expression became serious. "That means the people of both shrines are looking for us. We can't expose ourselves. Otherwise, we'll be besieged by them. Now, we can only think of a way to let them kill each other and then reap the benefits." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly. "This is the most ideal situation. It would be best if it could be realized. But in fact, it's very difficult to carry out this plan. We need to be patient enough to find an opportunity." Bai Long suddenly thought of something. His eyes lit up. He reminded, "Master, since the God Emperor of the immortal God Emperor is rushing to the western border, doesn't that mean the headquarters of the Pantheon of Immortality is empty? If we rush to the headquarters of the Pantheon of Immortality and create some chaos, the God Emperor of the immortal God Emperor will definitely rush back." You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.